There is a moment near the end of Game of Thrones, Season 6, Episode 10, an episode called The Winds of Winter, that aired on June 26, 2016, where the camera holds on a newborn baby's face. The baby is screaming. He is covered in blood. His mother is dying on a bed of fever and roses in a tower in the mountains of Dorne, and she is whispering something to her brother, something the audience cannot quite hear, and then the camera pushes in on the infant's dark eyes, and the shot cuts, without a single word of explanation, to the face of Jon Snow, standing in the Great Hall of Winterfell, being declared king in the north. 2 faces, 1 cut, and with that single edit, the most famous fan theory in the history of television was confirmed. R+L J. Rhaegar Targaryen plus Lyanna Stark equals Jon Snow. A theory that readers of George R.R. Martin's novels had held onto for nearly 20 years. A theory so central to the identity of A Song of Ice and Fire that Martin himself used it as a test. When David Benioff and D.B. Weiss came to him in 2006, asking for the rights to adapt his books into a television series, Martin asked them a single question: who is Jon Snow's mother? They answered correctly. And that answer is the reason the show exists at all. Think about what that means, not just for the story, for the relationship between a story and the people who love it. Because Game of Thrones was not simply a show that people watched. It was a show that people theorized about. It was a show that turned millions of ordinary viewers into detectives, into scholars, into obsessives who paused episodes frame by frame, who cross-referenced dialogue from Season 1 with imagery from Season 6, who built elaborate documents connecting prophecy to character, to geography, to bloodline. The theories were not a sideshow. The theories were the show. They were the engine that kept people talking between seasons, the reason forums burned with activity at 2 in the morning, the thing that made Game of Thrones not just a drama, but a collective intellectual project, shared by millions of people around the world. And what is remarkable is how many of those theories turned out to be right. Not all of them. Some were beautiful and wrong. Some were wrong and beautiful precisely because they were wrong, because the version of the story they imagined was more elegant than the one the show ultimately delivered. But the act of theorizing, the act of looking at this enormous, intricate narrative and saying, I think I see what you are doing, I think I see where this is going, that act was one of the great pleasures of being alive during the years Game of Thrones aired, from its premiere on April 17, 2011, to its finale on May 19, 2019. This video is about those theories, the ones that came true, the ones that did not, the ones that changed how we understood the show, even when the show itself never confirmed them, the ones that revealed something about the story that the story itself seemed almost afraid to say out loud. Welcome to the long night. Get comfortable, settle in, turn the lights down low. This is going to take a while, and there is no rush. We have theories to talk about, prophecies to untangle, and a world of ice and fire to wander through. And if you have not subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these. Let us get into it. The theory that started everything, the one that defined what it meant to be a fan of this story, is the one we have already touched on, R+L J. But to understand why this theory mattered so much, you have to understand what the show told you about Jon Snow for 5 full seasons, before that cut in The Winds of Winter changed everything. From the very first episode, Winter is Coming, which premiered on April 17, 2011, Jon Snow is defined by a single, immovable fact. He is a bastard. He is Ned Stark's bastard, born of some unnamed woman during Robert's Rebellion, brought home to Winterfell as an infant and raised alongside Ned's trueborn children. Catelyn Stark hates him for it. Not loudly, not violently, but with a cold, persistent cruelty that the show never lets you forget. There is a scene early in the series where Catelyn sits beside Bran's sickbed after his fall, and Jon comes to say goodbye before leaving for the Wall, and Catelyn looks at him and says, essentially, that it should have been him, that she wished it had been Jon who fell, that she wished this boy, this child she has watched grow up in her own home, were dead instead of her son. The show does not frame this as a monstrous thing. It frames it as a human thing, and that framing is part of what makes the R+L J reveal so devastating. Because when you understand what is actually true about Jon's birth, you realize that Catelyn's hatred was built on a lie. A lie told by the most honorable man in Westeros. A lie told to protect a child. The theory, in its simplest form, states that Jon Snow is not the son of Eddard Stark and some tavern woman or camp follower. He is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, the crown prince of the 7 kingdoms, and Lyanna Stark, Ned's own sister. Robert's Rebellion, the war that overthrew the Targaryen dynasty and put Robert Baratheon on the Iron Throne, was fought in part because Robert believed Rhaegar had kidnapped and raped Lyanna. That was the story. That was what everyone in Westeros believed. But the theory suggests something very different. It suggests that Rhaegar and Lyanna were in love, that they ran away together willingly, that Lyanna went to the Tower of Joy not as a prisoner but as a bride, and that when she died there, in that blood-soaked bed of fever and blue winter roses, she died giving birth to a son she placed in her brother's arms, a son she begged Ned to protect. Because if Robert Baratheon ever learned that Rhaegar Targaryen had a living heir, that child would be killed. So Ned did the only thing he could do. He lied. Ned Stark, the man whose entire identity is built on honor and truth, told the biggest lie of his life. He claimed the child as his own bastard. He endured his wife's hatred. He endured the whispered questions, the assumptions, the stain on his reputation. He carried that lie for 17 years, all the way to his grave, and he never told a soul. Not Robert, not Catelyn, not Jon himself. The evidence for this theory was scattered across the books like breadcrumbs. Ned's fever dream about the Tower of Joy. Lyanna's dying words, "Promise me, Ned," repeated like a mantra. The blue winter roses that appear whenever Lyanna is mentioned. The same roses that grow at the base of the tower. The fact that Ned never, not once in the entire first novel, thinks of Jon as his son in his internal monologue. He thinks of Jon. He thinks of his promise. But he never thinks the words, "my son." That absence is deafening once you notice it. In the show, the evidence accumulated more slowly, but it was there. Ned's refusal to discuss Jon's mother, the way he shuts down Robert Baratheon's questions in the first season, the way he says, in one of his final scenes, that the next time he and Jon speak, he will tell him about his mother, a promise he never gets to keep, because he is executed on the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor before he ever sees Jon again. Season 6 is where the show began to confirm the theory in stages. First, in Oathbreaker, Season 6, Episode 3, which aired on May 8, 2016, Bran uses his green sight to witness the battle at the Tower of Joy. He watches his young father, accompanied by Howland Reed and a small group of northern soldiers, fight the last of the Targaryen Kingsguard, 2 knights, Sir Arthur Dayne and Sir Gerald Hightower, the finest swordsmen in the realm, standing guard at a remote tower in the mountains of Dorne. And the question the show wants you to ask is, what are they guarding? The Targaryen dynasty has fallen. The war is over. Rhaegar is dead. The Mad King is dead. What could possibly be in that tower that is worth 2 members of the Kingsguard dying for? The answer, of course, is a baby. A Targaryen baby. The last living heir of Rhaegar Targaryen. But the show does something fascinating with this scene. It does not let Bran enter the tower. The three-eyed raven pulls him out of the vision before he can follow Ned inside. And there is another detail that matters enormously. Bran watches the fight, and he sees something that contradicts everything he has been told about his father. He sees Howland Reed stab Arthur Dayne in the back. He sees his father, the Honorable Ned Stark, finish Dayne off after Dayne has already been wounded from behind. The story Bran grew up hearing, the story of his father's heroic single combat with the greatest knight in Westeros, is a lie. And if that story is a lie, what else is a lie? What else has Ned Stark hidden? The show is not being subtle about what it is doing here. It is teaching you, through Bran, that the history you think you know is unreliable, that the stories passed down by the victors of Robert's Rebellion are not the truth. They are the version of the truth that the victors needed to believe. And once you understand that, the reveal that comes later in the season, the reveal that Jon Snow is not who anyone thought he was, feels not like a twist but like an inevitability. Like the truth was always there, waiting beneath the surface of the story, and the show was simply peeling back the layers one by one until there was nothing left to hide behind. The actual confirmation comes in the Winds of Winter. Bran returns to the Tower of Joy in another vision, and this time he follows Ned inside. He climbs the stairs. He finds Lyanna on her deathbed, surrounded by blood-soaked sheets with a baby in her arms. And she whispers to Ned. The camera is tight on her face. Her lips move. She says, in words that are barely audible, "His name is," and the show cuts away before you can hear the full name. She says, "If Robert finds out, he will kill him. You know he will. You have to protect him. Promise me, Ned. Promise me." And then the camera pushes in on the baby's face. Those dark, unknowing eyes. And it cuts to Jon Snow. That is the whole story. 2 decades of theorizing. 2 decades of readers arguing on internet forums, building evidence, debating counter-evidence, and the show confirms it with a single cut. No exposition, no voiceover, no character explaining the implications. Just a baby's face dissolving into a man's face, and the audience understanding, in a single breath, that everything they thought they knew about this story has shifted. What makes R+L = J more than just a plot twist is what it does to the entire emotional architecture of the show. Think about what it means for Ned Stark. This is a man who built his entire identity on honor, and the single most dishonorable thing he was ever accused of, fathering a bastard, was actually the most honorable thing he ever did. He sacrificed his reputation to save a child's life. He endured his wife's contempt year after year, and he never broke. He never told her the truth, because telling her the truth would have put Jon in danger. The fewer people who knew, the safer the child would be. Think about what it means for Catelyn. She spent her entire life hating a child who was never what she thought he was. Her cruelty toward Jon, her inability to love him, her resentment of his very existence, all of it was based on a misunderstanding. She thought Jon was the living proof of her husband's infidelity. He was actually the living proof of her husband's love for his sister. Catelyn died at the Red Wedding, at the Twins, in Season 3, Episode 9, The Reigns of Castamere, which aired on June 2, 2013, without ever knowing the truth. She died hating an innocent child, and she died not knowing that the man she married was even more honorable than she ever realized. And think about what it means for Jon. He spent his entire life believing he was lesser, believing he was stained, believing he was the product of his father's single moral failure, and the truth is that he is not a bastard at all. He is not the son of a lord and a tavern woman. He is the son of a prince and a highborn lady who loved each other enough to start a war, or at least, to let a war be started in their names. He is Aegon Targaryen, 6th of his name, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, and he will never be at peace with that knowledge. He will spend the rest of his life running from it, refusing it, denying it, because Jon Snow does not want the throne. He never wanted the throne. All he ever wanted was to know who he was. And the answer, when it finally comes, does not set him free. It traps him in a different cage. That is the gap at the heart of R+L = J. The distance between what the theory means as a puzzle, a satisfying answer to a narrative mystery, and what it means as a human experience. As a puzzle, it is perfect. Every piece fits. Every clue pays off. As a human story, it is devastating, because the truth does not heal any of the wounds it was supposed to heal. Ned is already dead. Catelyn is already dead. Jon's sense of himself, the identity he built as Ned Stark's bastard, as a brother of the Night's Watch, as a man who chose duty over desire, all of that is shattered by the revelation of who he actually is. The truth does not make things better, it makes things more complicated, and that is exactly what George R.R. Martin's story has always been about. The idea that the truth is never simple, and that knowing the truth is rarely the same thing as being saved by it. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The theory of Jon Snow's parentage is, in many ways, the foundation stone. It is the theory that taught an entire generation of fans how to read this story, how to look beneath the surface, how to follow the breadcrumbs that George R.R. Martin scattered across thousands of pages. But it is not the only theory that shaped how people understood Game of Thrones. And the next one we need to talk about is older than the story itself, older than the novels, older in fact than recorded history within the world of the show. It is the prophecy of Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, and the question of who, if anyone, was destined to save the world from the long night. The legend goes like this. Thousands of years before the events of Game of Thrones, during a period of darkness and cold so absolute that it was called the Long Night, a hero arose. His name was Azor Ahai. He was a warrior, a smith, a leader, and he needed a weapon capable of defeating the darkness. He spent 30 days and 30 nights forging a blade, and when he tempered it in water, the steel shattered. He began again, 50 days and 50 nights this time, and when he tried to temper the blade by driving it through the heart of a captured lion, the steel shattered again. The third time, he worked for 100 days and 100 nights, and when the blade was finished, he knew what he had to do. He called for his wife, Nissa, and he asked her to bare her breast, and he drove the sword into her heart. Her soul combined with the steel, her blood and her love and her courage flowed into the metal. And the sword burst into flame, Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes. And with that blade, Azor Ahai drove back the darkness and ended the long night. It is a creation myth, a legend, the kind of story that every culture in the real world has some version of. The hero who sacrifices everything, including the person he loves most, to save the world. But in the world of Game of Thrones, it is more than a legend. It is a prophecy. Because the ancient texts, written down in the Shadowlands of Ashai over 5,000 years ago, promise that Azor Ahai will be reborn. When the stars bleed, and the cold breath of darkness falls heavy on the world, a warrior will draw from the fire a burning sword, and that sword will be Lightbringer, and the darkness will flee before him, or her, because here is the detail that changes everything. The prophecy is written in High Valyrian, and in High Valyrian, the word for prince is gender neutral. The prince that was promised could just as easily be a princess. This is where the theory becomes something more than a fun piece of world building, because the show introduces this prophecy through a very specific character. Melisandre, the Red Woman, the priestess of the Lord of Light who arrives at Dragonstone in Season 2 and attaches herself to Stannis Baratheon, telling him that he is Azor Ahai reborn, that he is the prince that was promised, that he will lead the world through the coming darkness. And for several seasons, the show lets you believe, or at least consider, that she might be right. Stannis pulls a sword from a burning pyre on the beach at Dragonstone, and Melisandre declares it Lightbringer. He is a king. He is fighting a war. He is, by the letter of Westerosi law, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne after Robert's death. The pieces seem to fit. But they do not. Not really. And the show tells you they do not. Quietly, through small details that are easy to miss. Maester Aemon, the ancient, blind maester of the Night's Watch, comments in Season 5 that Stannis' sword gives off light but no heat. It is a trick, not a miracle. Lightbringer is supposed to burn with the fire of a sacrificed soul. Stannis' sword is just a sword with a glamour on it. And Stannis himself, for all his rigid sense of justice, for all his iron will, is not a man who inspires love or devotion. He is not a hero in any sense that the prophecy seems to require. He is a man who burns his own daughter alive at the urging of a priestess who is wrong about almost everything. Shireen's death, which occurs in Season 5, Episode 9, The Dance of Dragons, which aired on June 7, 2015, is the moment where the Stannis as Azor Ahai theory dies. Not because the show says it explicitly, but because the show shows you what it looks like when a man tries to fulfill a prophecy through sheer force of will, without being the person the prophecy is actually about. Stannis sacrifices his daughter. He burns her at the stake while she screams for her parents. And the result is not salvation. It is not Lightbringer reborn. It is a storm that melts the snow around his camp, and then half his army deserts, and then his wife hangs herself, and then Melisandre abandons him, and then he marches on Winterfell with a broken, starving force and is destroyed by the Boltons. That is what happens when you try to force a prophecy. The prophecy does not bend to your will. It breaks you. So if Stannis was not Azor Ahai, who was? This is the question that burned through fan communities for years, and the two most compelling candidates were the two characters who, by the end of the show, had the strongest claims to the Iron Throne and the strongest connections to fire and ice. Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. The case for Daenerys is, on the surface, the strongest. She was born on Dragonstone during a great storm, which some interpret as being born amidst salt and smoke, two of the conditions the prophecy requires. She walked into Khal Drogo's funeral pyre and emerged with 3 living dragons, which fulfills the prophecy's promise that Azor Ahai reborn will wake dragons from stone. She is a Targaryen, and the Targaryens are the blood of old Valyria, the Dragon Lords, the people most intimately connected to the magic of fire in the entire known world. And she is, quite literally, the breaker of chains, the liberator of slaves, the woman who looked at a world built on suffering and said, "No, I will make it different." The case for Jon is different, but equally compelling. He is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, who himself was obsessed with the prophecy of the prince that was promised. In the books, there are passages suggesting that Rhaegar believed his son would be the promised prince, and some readers have argued that Rhaegar's entire relationship with Lyanna Stark was driven by his belief that he needed to fulfill the prophecy by producing a third child, a third head of the dragon. Jon was, quite literally, stabbed to death by his brothers in the Night's Watch at the end of Season 5, in Mother's Mercy, which aired on June 14, 2015, and then resurrected by Melisandre at the beginning of Season 6. He died and was reborn. He came back from death itself. If that is not being born again amidst salt and smoke, it is difficult to imagine what would be. And then there is Arya Stark, who was never a candidate for Azor Ahai in any traditional reading of the prophecy, but who is the one who actually kills the Night King. In Season 8, Episode 3, The Long Night, which aired on April 28, 2019, the armies of the living make their last stand at Winterfell against the army of the dead. The battle is a catastrophe. Every defense fails. The trenches are breached. The walls are overrun. The dead fill the courtyard of Winterfell like a rising tide, and then the Night King walks into the Godswood, where Bran sits in his wheelchair beneath the heart tree waiting. The Night King reaches for his weapon. He is going to end it. He is going to destroy the memory of the world. And Arya leaps out of the darkness. She comes from nowhere. She comes from the shadows that she spent years learning to inhabit. The Night King catches her by the throat in midair, but Arya drops her Valyrian steel dagger from her right hand, catches it with her left, and drives it into his chest. The Night King shatters. His lieutenants shatter. Every wight in his army collapses. The long night is over, and the person who ended it was not the prince anyone was promised. Sit with that for a moment. The prophecy of Azor Ahai is, depending on how you read the show, either a puzzle with a surprising answer, or a puzzle that was never meant to be solved, because the show never confirms that anyone is Azor Ahai. It never shows Lightbringer, the real Lightbringer, the sword forged in the heart of a loved one. It never has a character stand in front of the camera and say, "This is the fulfillment of the prophecy." What it does instead is something far more interesting. It shows you three characters who each embody a different aspect of the Azor Ahai legend, and it lets you decide which one, if any, was the real thing. Daenerys has the dragons. She has the fire. She has the birth amidst salt and smoke. But she also burns an entire city alive, and that is not salvation. That is not what Azor Ahai was supposed to do. Jon has the death and rebirth. He has the Targaryen blood. He has the moral authority, the willingness to sacrifice everything for the greater good. But he does not kill the Night King. He does not wield Lightbringer. He does not end the long night with a flaming sword. Arya has the kill. She is the one who actually ends the threat. She drives a blade into the heart of darkness, and the darkness dies. But she is not born amidst salt and smoke. She is not a Targaryen. She does not fit the prophecy in any of the ways the prophecy told you to look for. This is the show telling you something about prophecy itself. That prophecy is a story people tell themselves about the future. And like all stories, it is incomplete, it is biased, it is shaped by the hopes and fears of the people who tell it. The people of Westeros wanted a single hero, a chosen one, a prince on a white horse who would save them all. What they got instead was a collective effort, a shared sacrifice, a battle won not by destiny, but by stubbornness and luck, and a girl with a dagger who was in the right place at the right time. There is a version of Game of Thrones where the Azor Ahai prophecy is fulfilled neatly, where Jon Snow draws a flaming sword from the fire, rides out against the Night King, and saves the world in single combat. That version of the story would be satisfying in the way that fairy tales are satisfying. It would give you exactly what you expected. And part of what made Game of Thrones the show it was, for better and for worse, is that it refused to do that. It refused to give you the clean version. It gave you the messy version instead. The version where prophecy is a map drawn by someone who has never been to the territory, and the people who actually walk the territory find that the ground does not match the lines on the page. Whether that refusal was brilliant or frustrating depends on who you ask. But the theory of Azor Ahai, the years of debate about who the prince that was promised would be, the elaborate arguments and counter-arguments and textual analyses, all of that mattered. Not because the show answered the question, but because the question itself, the act of asking it, of looking at this story and trying to see the shape of its ending, was one of the deepest pleasures the show had to offer. The answer was messy. The question was magnificent. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The prophecy of Azor Ahai asked who would save the world. But there was another theory, one that ran parallel to it for years, that asked a different and in some ways more unsettling question. Not who would save the world, but who would destroy it. And the answer, according to this theory, was the character most people spent 6 seasons rooting for. The Mad Queen theory. The idea that Daenerys Targaryen, mother of dragons, breaker of chains, the woman who walked into fire and emerged unburned, was always going to burn the world down. This theory existed long before the show confirmed it, long before Season 8, Episode 5, The Bells, which aired on May 12, 2019, when Daenerys mounted Drogon and incinerated the city of King's Landing after the bells of surrender had already rung. It existed in the books, in the forums, in the quiet unease that certain readers felt whenever Daenerys made a decision that was framed as heroic, but described in language that was anything but. And what makes this theory so fascinating, so divisive, so impossible to discuss without people getting genuinely angry, is that it forces you to confront a question about how stories work. Can a character be a hero and a villain at the same time? Can the audience be wrong about someone they love? And if the answer is yes, whose fault is that? The characters, the shows, or the audience's own desire to see what they want to see? Let us start at the beginning. When you first meet Daenerys in Season 1, she is a victim. There is no other word for it. She is a teenage girl being sold by her brother Viserys to a Dothraki warlord in exchange for an army. She has no agency, she has no power. She has nothing except the name Targaryen, and the abuse she has endured from a brother who has spent their entire lives telling her that the throne is his, by right, and that she exists only to help him reclaim it. The show depicts her marriage to Khal Drogo with unflinching honesty. She is terrified, she is alone, she is being used. And then she rises. That is the story of Season 1. Daenerys Targaryen goes from a frightened girl to a woman who commands respect, who earns the love of her husband, who stands up to her abusive brother and watches without flinching as molten gold is poured over his head. He was no dragon, she says. Fire cannot kill a dragon, and the audience cheers. Of course they cheer. She has earned it. She has survived things that would break most people, and she has not only survived but grown stronger. But the theory asks you to go back to that moment and look at it again. Not at what happened, but at how Daenerys reacted to it. Her brother is murdered in front of her, gold poured over his skull while he screams. And she watches. She does not turn away. She does not cry. She does not grieve. She watches, and she pronounces judgment on the dead. He was no dragon. That is not the reaction of a person who has lost a family member. That is the reaction of a person who has decided that certain people deserve what happens to them, and that she is the one who gets to make that determination. The theory argues that this pattern, the pattern of Daenerys dispensing justice that looks an awful lot like cruelty, begins in Season 1 and never stops. It just gets bigger, the scale changes, the targets change, but the fundamental behavior remains the same. Daenerys decides someone is an enemy, and then she destroys them utterly, and the show frames it as heroism, and the audience accepts the framing because Daenerys is sympathetic, and her enemies are not. Look at Season 2. In Valar Morghulis, Season 2, Episode 10, which aired on June 3, 2012, Daenerys enters the House of the Undying in the city of Qarth, and inside, she is shown a vision. She walks into the throne room of the Red Keep, and the roof is destroyed, and the room is covered in what appears to be snow, or ash. The ambiguity is the point. At the time, viewers assumed it was snow, a metaphor for the coming winter, for the threat from the north, for Jon Snow himself, perhaps. But after the events of the Bells, the meaning shifts. It was not snow, it was ash. The ash of a city she would burn. The vision was not a warning about the Night King, it was a warning about Daenerys herself. The show told you in Season 2 what she would do in Season 8, and you did not see it because you did not want to see it. Look at Season 4. In Oathkeeper, Season 4, Episode 4, which aired on April 27, 2014, Daenerys conquers the city of Meereen and discovers that the slave masters have crucified 163 slave children along the road as a warning. Her response is to crucify 163 of the city's masters. Eye for eye, nail for nail, and Sir Barristan Selmy, one of the most honorable men in Westeros, looks at her and says, essentially, that sometimes it is best to answer injustice with mercy. Daenerys looks at him and says she will answer injustice with justice. And the audience cheers again, because the masters are monsters, because the children were innocent, because Daenerys is right, that what was done to those children was evil. But remove the framing, remove the sympathetic camera angles, remove the stirring music. Describe what actually happened in the flattest possible language. A foreign conqueror arrived at a city, killed its ruling class without trial, without determining individual guilt, without any process of justice whatsoever, and nailed their bodies to posts along the road. That is not justice. That is vengeance. and the distinction between justice and vengeance is one of the central themes of Game of Thrones, and Daenerys never learns to see it. The theory builds from there. Every season adds evidence. In Season 5, Daenerys feeds one of Meereen's nobles to her dragons, watching as the man is burned alive and then torn apart. She does not know if the man is guilty of anything. She does it to send a message. In Season 6, she burns the Dothraki khals alive inside the temple of the Dosh Khaleen, and again, the show frames it as a moment of triumph, of liberation, of a woman seizing power from men who tried to control her. And it is all of those things. But it is also a woman who has discovered that burning people alive is an effective way to solve problems, and who keeps reaching for that solution whenever she encounters resistance. The theory does not argue that Daenerys is evil. That is the crucial distinction. It argues that she is a person with enormous power and an increasingly absolute certainty that she knows what is right, and that the combination of power and certainty, unchecked by doubt, unchecked by any institution or advisor strong enough to say no to her and make it stick, leads inevitably to catastrophe. It is the Targaryen coin flip that Cersei references in Season 2, Episode 7, A Man Without Honor, which aired on May 13, 2012. Every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin, and the world holds its breath to see whether it lands on greatness or madness. The theory argues that Daenerys' coin was always spinning, that the same fire that made her a liberator in Meereen made her a tyrant in King's Landing, that the difference between the two was never about who she was, it was about who was standing in front of her. The foreshadowing runs deep, deeper than most viewers noticed on a first watch. In Season 2, Episode 4, Garden of Bones, which aired on April 22, 2012, Daenerys stands outside the gates of Qarth and declares that when her dragons are grown, she will lay waste to armies and burn cities to the ground. She says this, out loud, on camera, in Season 2. And no one notices, because she is small and powerless and sympathetic, and the statement sounds like the desperate bravado of a refugee, not a genuine declaration of intent. But go back and watch that scene after the bells. Watch her face when she says it. She is not bluffing. She means every word. She is telling you exactly who she is, and the show is counting on you not to believe her because you love her too much to hear it. This is the gap. The enormous, yawning gap at the center of the Mad Queen theory. The gap between what Daenerys says she will do, what she has always said she will do, and what the audience expected her to do. The audience expected a hero. They expected a liberator. They expected the woman who freed the Unsullied, who broke the chains of Slaver's Bay, who inspired devotion in everyone who followed her, to arrive in Westeros and be the queen everyone deserved. And instead, she arrived in Westeros and discovered that nobody wanted her. Jon had a better claim to the throne. The Northern Lords did not trust her. Cersei would not yield. Her closest advisors were dead. Missandei beheaded. Jorah killed defending her at Winterfell. Rhaegal shot down by Euron's scorpion bolts. She had lost everything. She had given everything. And the people of Westeros looked at her and saw a foreign invader, not a savior. The show argues that this is what breaks her. Not madness in the clinical sense, not some genetic switch that flips because she is a Targaryen, but grief, isolation, the absolute collapse of the narrative she has told herself for her entire life, the narrative that she is the rightful queen, that the people of Westeros will welcome her, that she is destined to reclaim her family's throne and make the world better. When that narrative dies, when Daenerys looks at King's Landing and sees not her birthright, but a city full of people who will never love her, she chooses the only tool she has left, fear. And fear, for Daenerys, has always meant fire. The Bells aired on May 12, 2019, and it divided the audience in a way that no episode of television had ever divided an audience before. Not because the thing that happened was wrong. The foreshadowing was there. The evidence was there. The theory had been right for years. What divided the audience was the speed of it, the compression, the sense that the show had been building toward this for 8 seasons, but then executed it in a single episode, without enough time to let the audience feel Daenerys' descent the way they needed to feel it. The theory was right. The execution, many argued, was not. And that tension, between a theory that is narratively correct and an execution that feels emotionally insufficient, is one of the most important things you can learn from the Mad Queen theory, because it reveals something about the relationship between a story and its audience that goes beyond Game of Thrones. It reveals that being right is not enough. You also have to be convincing. You have to earn the landing. And the show, in its final season, asked the audience to accept something that the theory had prepared them for intellectually, but had not prepared them for emotionally. The head understood. The heart resisted, and the result was one of the most polarizing moments in television history. But step back from the execution. Step back from the debate about whether it was rushed. Look at the theory itself, in its purest form, and what you see is something profound. You see a story about how heroes become villains, not through sudden transformation, but through gradual, almost imperceptible shifts in the moral framework they use to justify their actions. Every step Daenerys takes makes sense in the moment. Every act of violence she commits can be justified by the violence that was committed against her or against the people she is trying to protect. The crucifixions were a response to the crucifixion of children. The burning of the halls was self-defense. The execution of the Tarlys was a wartime necessity. Each individual action has a logic to it, but the accumulation of those actions, seen together, paints a picture of someone who has been moving toward catastrophe for a very long time, and who never had anyone around her strong enough to pull her back from the edge. That is not the behavior of a monster. That is the behavior of a human being with too much power and not enough people willing to tell her no. And that, the Mad Queen theory argues, is the scariest kind of villain. Not the one who cackles on a throne. The one who genuinely believes she is saving the world while she burns it. The Mad Queen theory and the prophecy of Azor Ahai have something in common. They both deal with the question of destiny, of whether the future is fixed or fluid, written in fire or shaped by choice. But there is another theory in Game of Thrones that takes that question even further. A theory that asks, not just whether the future is determined, but whether the past is too. Whether someone could reach across time itself, change what has already happened, and in doing so, create the very events they were trying to prevent. That theory begins with a word. A single word spoken by a giant, gentle man, over and over again, for most of his life. The word is Hodor. Hodor is one of the most beloved characters in Game of Thrones, and for most of the series, he is also one of the simplest. He is a stable boy at Winterfell, enormous and strong and gentle, and the only word he can say is his own name, Hodor. He says it when he is happy. He says it when he is frightened. He says it when Bran Stark wargs into his mind and uses his body to carry Bran's broken form through the frozen wastes beyond the wall. He is loyal in a way that goes beyond words, quite literally, because he has no other words. And for 5 seasons, nobody questions why. Nobody asks what happened to him. Nobody wonders why this man, whose real name is Wireless, can only say one word. It is treated as a quirk, a character trait, a source of gentle comedy in a show that desperately needs gentle comedy. And then comes The Door, Season 6, Episode 5, May 22nd, 2016. An episode that, even years later, is almost impossible to discuss without feeling the weight of what it reveals. Because The Door does not just explain why Hodor can only say one word. It reveals that Hodor's entire life, from the moment he lost his ability to speak to the moment he died, was shaped by a single event that has not happened yet. An event that happens in the present of the show. An event caused by Bran Stark. Here is what happens. Bran is in the cave beneath the great weirwood tree beyond the wall, training with the three-eyed raven, played in this season by Max von Sydow. He is learning to use his green sight, to slip through time and witness events from the past. And in one of these visions he is standing in the courtyard of Winterfell, decades before his birth, watching a young Ned Stark spar with other boys. He sees a young, healthy Hodor, a stable boy named Wireless, who can speak normally, who is whole and complete and unbroken. But Bran stays too long in the vision. He lingers. He has been warned not to do this. The three-eyed raven has told him, repeatedly, that spending too long in the past is dangerous, that the past can trap you, that you can get stuck there. Bran does not listen, and while he is in the past, the Night King finds the cave. The army of the dead descends. The whites pour in through the tunnels. The children of the forest fight and fall. The three-eyed raven is killed. And Mira Reed, the young woman who has been protecting Bran since they left Winterfell, screams at him to do something. She screams at him to warg into Hodor, to take control of Hodor's body so that Hodor can carry Bran to safety. And Bran does it. But he does it while he is still inside the vision. He is in 2 times at once. He is in the present, warging into Hodor, and he is in the past, standing in the courtyard of Winterfell, watching young Wireless. And something happens that the show has never depicted before. The 2 timelines connect. Mira is screaming, "Hold the door" at Hodor in the present, telling him to hold the door of the cave shut while they escape, to use his enormous body as a barricade against the tide of the dead. And through Bran's warging connection, through the impossible bridge between past and present, young Wylis in the courtyard hears Mira's voice. He hears the command, hold the door," and it breaks him. He collapses. His eyes roll back. He begins to seize. And the only words that come out of his mouth, from that moment forward, for the rest of his life, are a slurred, compressed version of the last thing he will ever hear. Hold the door. Hold the door. Hold door. Hodor. 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 Let that sit for a second. Hodor's entire identity, the one word that defines him, the word that the audience has been hearing for 5 seasons, is not a name. It is a command from the future, echoing backward through time, destroying a young man's mind in the process. Wylis lost his ability to speak, lost his entire identity, because decades in the future, Bran Stark would warg into him at the wrong moment, creating a feedback loop between 2 points in time that shattered Wylis's consciousness and replaced it with a single, screaming instruction: hold the door. And here is the part that the theory builds on, the part that changes how you think about the entire show. This is not an accident. This is not a glitch in Bran's powers. This is how time works in Game of Thrones. The past is not separate from the future. They are the same thing. There is no first version of events that existed before Bran changed them. The version where Wylis becomes Hodor is the only version that ever existed. Bran did not alter the past. He fulfilled it. The loop was always closed. Hodor was always Hodor, because Bran was always going to do what he did. It is a self-fulfilling paradox, a snake eating its own tail. The show had hinted at this before the door, though the hints were easy to miss. In the Tower of Joy flashback in Oathbreaker, Season 6, Episode 3, Bran calls out to his father, and young Ned appears to hear something. He turns, just slightly, as if he heard a voice on the wind. The three-eyed raven tells Bran that the past is already written, that the ink is dry, but Bran's actions suggest otherwise. Or rather, they suggest something more subtle and more terrifying. The ink is dry, but Bran is part of the ink. His interference is not a change to the timeline. It is a feature of the timeline. It was always there. This opens up a theoretical rabbit hole so deep that fans have been falling through it ever since the episode aired. If Bran can affect the past, how much of the past has he affected? If Hodor's entire life was shaped by a single moment of interference from the future, what other moments in the history of Westeros were shaped by similar interference? Was the three-eyed raven always guiding events, manipulating the past to ensure that the present would unfold in a specific way? Is the entire history of Westeros, in some sense, a product of Bran's influence, rippling backward from the moment he sat in front of that weirwood tree and opened his eyes to the totality of time? The show does not answer these questions. It does not even acknowledge most of them. But the theory of time-traveling Bran, in its various forms, argues that the answer to all of these questions is yes, that Bran Stark, or the entity that was once Bran Stark, has been shaping events throughout the entire history of Westeros. That the voices the Mad King heard, the voices that drove him mad, the voices that made him scream, "Burn them all," were Bran, trying to warn someone about the army of the dead, reaching too far back in time and breaking yet another mind the way he broke Wylis's. That Bran the Builder, the legendary founder of House Stark who built the wall in Winterfell thousands of years ago, was actually Bran Stark himself, sent so far back in time that he became a figure of myth. That the entire history of Westeros, its wars and its prophecies, and its ancient pacts, and its magical constructions, was engineered by a crippled boy sitting beneath a tree, looking through time with eyes that see everything and understand nothing. This needs to be stated plainly. The show does not confirm this. George R.R. Martin has not confirmed this. It is speculation, built on extrapolation, built on the single proven instance of temporal interference that the door depicts. But the reason the theory persists, the reason it continues to fascinate people years after the show ended, is that the door proves that such interference is possible. It proves that Bran can reach into the past and change things, or rather, it proves that Bran's actions in the present are, and always were, part of the past. And if that is true for Hodor, why would it not be true for other things? Why would Bran stop at one moment? Why would the universe stop at one intervention? The emotional weight of the door is almost unbearable. Hodor dies holding a door. He dies doing exactly what his broken mind has been telling him to do for his entire life. He dies fulfilling the purpose that was burned into his consciousness by an event that would not happen for decades. And Bran, the boy who caused it, the boy who broke Wylis and turned him into Hodor, sits in his sledge and is carried away into the snow, knowing what he did, knowing that he sacrificed a man's entire life, an entire identity, for a single moment of escape. The show does not comment on this. It does not add music to tell you how to feel. It just holds on the door, and the hands, and the dead pressing forward, and Hodor's face, and the sound of wood splintering, and then silence. And the silence is where the theory lives, in the space between what the show showed you and what it did not explain. In the implication that this is not the only time it happened. That time in Game of Thrones is not a river flowing in one direction. It is an ocean, and Bran is standing on the shore, and every stone he throws sends ripples in every direction, and some of those ripples become waves, and some of those waves become the entire shape of the coastline. Think about what that means for the rest of the story. If Bran is the reason Hodor exists, then Bran is also the reason Bran survived. Hodor carried Bran beyond the wall. Hodor was the reason Bran reached the Three-Eyed Raven. Without Hodor, Bran never becomes the Three-Eyed Raven, and without becoming the Three-Eyed Raven, Bran never wargs into Hodor in the past, and Wylis never becomes Hodor in the first place. The loop has no beginning, it has no end. It just is. It exists because it must exist, because the story requires it, because the ink was always dry. That is a very different understanding of Game of Thrones than the one most people walk away with. Most people see a story about politics and war and power and the messy, human struggle for survival, and it is all of those things. But if you take the implications of the door seriously, it is also a story about determinism, about the question of whether free will exists in a universe where the future has already happened, where the past is shaped by events that have not occurred yet, where a boy can sit beneath a tree and see the entirety of time and realize that none of it was ever in anyone's control. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The question of what Bran can do with his powers leads naturally to another question, one that the show raises explicitly but never fully answers. If Bran can see through time, if Bran can affect the past, if Bran is in some sense the living memory of the world, then what exactly is the Night King trying to destroy when he comes for Bran? What is the real war in Game of Thrones about? And the answer, according to one of the show's most haunting theories, is not land or power or vengeance. It is memory itself. The Night King is, in many ways, the most mysterious figure in Game of Thrones. He appears for the first time in Oathkeeper, Season 4, Episode 4, and he is never named in that episode. He is a figure in the ice, a silhouette of cold, a thing without words or apparent motive, and for several seasons, that is all the audience knows about him. He is the enemy, he is death, he is the storm at the end of all things, and he is coming. But the show does give you his origin. It gives it to you in The Door, the same episode that reveals Hodor's secret. In one of Bran's visions, he travels far into the past, long before the events of the show, long before the Targaryen conquest, long before the Andals or the First Men built their kingdoms. He finds himself in a grove surrounding the same heart tree that exists in his own time, but there is no snow, the land is green, the world is warm, and the children of the forest, those strange, ancient, inhuman beings who once ruled Westeros before men came, are standing in a circle around a man tied to the tree. The man is unnamed, he is a first man, one of the humans who invaded Westeros thousands of years ago, cutting down the weirwood trees, waging war against the children, and the children, desperate, outnumbered, on the verge of extinction, do something terrible. Leaf, one of the children, takes a shard of dragonglass and drives it into the man's chest. His eyes turn blue, his skin turns pale. He becomes something that is not alive and not dead, something cold and ancient and terrible. He becomes the Night King, the first White Walker, a weapon created by the children of the forest to fight against humanity. And the weapon turned against its creators. The White Walkers could not be controlled. They did not just fight the First Men. They fought everything. They brought the long night, a winter that lasted a generation, a darkness that nearly ended all life on the continent. The children and the First Men had to join forces to defeat them, building the wall to keep them sealed away in the far north, And for thousands of years, the Night King and his army waited, frozen, patient, building their strength in the lands of always winter, where no living thing dared to go. The theory about the Night King's purpose goes deeper than his origin. His origin tells you what he was, a weapon, a tool, but the theory asks what he became in the thousands of years between his creation and his return. What does a weapon do when it has been left alone for millennia? Does it simply wait to be used again? Or does it develop something more? A purpose, a will, an agenda of its own? In Season 8, Episode 2, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which aired on April 21st, 2019, the surviving characters gather at Winterfell to prepare for the battle against the dead, and Bran says something that, at first, sounds like a simple plot explanation, but is actually the key to everything. He says that the Night King will come for him. He says that the Night King wants to destroy the three-eyed raven, and when Sam asks why, Bran says, he wants to erase this world, and I am its memory. That sentence is one of the most important in the entire series. The Night King does not want to conquer Westeros. He does not want to sit on the Iron Throne. He does not want power in any sense that the human characters understand power. He wants annihilation. Total, complete, absolute erasure. Not just the death of every living person, but the destruction of the very concept that those people ever existed. He wants an endless night, a world of silence and cold and nothing. And the only thing standing between him and that goal is the living memory of the world, encoded in a crippled boy sitting beneath a weirwood tree. Think about what that means for the show's thematic architecture. The entire series, from the first episode to the last, is about the Game of Thrones. It is about power, about who holds it, who wants it, who kills for it, who dies for it. Every character in King's Landing, every battle, every betrayal, every wedding and every funeral is about the struggle for the Iron Throne. And the Night King renders all of it meaningless. The Iron Throne does not matter. Cersei's schemes do not matter. Daenerys' dragons do not matter. Because if the Night King wins, there will be no one left to remember any of it. Not the wars, not the heroes, not the villains. Not the stories, nothing, just ice. Just silence. Just the long night, stretching on forever. The theory argues that this is what makes the Night King the truest villain in Game of Thrones. Not the most interesting, not the most complex, not the most human. He is none of those things. He is a force of nature given a face. He is entropy with a crown of ice. And the theory of his purpose, the idea that he is fighting not for territory or revenge, but for oblivion, casts the entire show in a different light. All those petty squabbles over the throne, all those characters cutting each other's throats for a few more years of power, they are doing exactly what the Night King wants them to do. They are weakening themselves. They are burning their own resources. They are making it easier for the darkness to win by refusing to look up from their wars long enough to see what is coming over the wall. There is a moment in Hardhome, Season 5, Episode 8, which aired on May 31st, 2015, that crystallizes this better than any other scene in the show. Jon Snow has traveled to the wildling settlement of Hardhome to convince the free folk to come south of the wall and fight alongside the Night's Watch against the dead. And the dead come. They come in a wave, pouring over the cliffs, smashing through the gates, killing everything in their path. Jon fights a White Walker with his Valyrian steel sword, Longclaw, and discovers that Valyrian steel can shatter White Walkers the way dragonglass can. He kills the Walker, but it does not matter, because for every white Jon cuts down, 10 more rise. For every small victory, the dead claim a larger one. And then comes the moment. Jon is in a rowboat, pulling away from the shore. The battle is lost. The survivors are fleeing. The Night King walks to the edge of the pier and stops. He looks at Jon. Jon looks at him. And then the Night King raises his arms, slowly, deliberately, and every corpse on the beach, every man and woman and child who died in the battle, stands up. Their eyes turn blue. They are his now. The dead he just created outnumber the living who escaped. And the Night King does not smile. He does not gloat. He just stares at Jon across the water with those glacial blue eyes. And the message is clear. You cannot win this. Every death is my victory. Every life you lose becomes my soldier. The math will always be on my side. The theory about the Night King's purpose gives that moment its full weight. He is not just building an army. He is demonstrating a philosophy. Death is not an ending. Death is a recruitment tool. Death is the mechanism by which the living world is converted, one body at a time, into his world, the world of silence, the world of oblivion, and the Night King has infinite patience because time is on his side. He has been waiting for thousands of years. He can wait a few more. Some fans were disappointed by how the show handled the Night King's story. His death in the Long Night, at the hands of Arya Stark, felt to many like an anticlimax. All that build-up, all those years of theorizing about his purpose, his connection to Bran, his ancient grudge against the living, and it ends with a single stab, in a single episode, halfway through the final season. The remaining 3 episodes of the show are not about the Night King at all. They are about the Game of Thrones. About Cersei and Daenerys and the Iron Throne, and all the human pettiness that the Night King was supposed to render irrelevant. The theory does not resolve this disappointment, but it contextualizes it, because the Night King's purpose was never to be the final boss. His purpose was to be the mirror, the thing that reflects back at the human characters and shows them how small their ambitions are. The thing that says, "You are fighting over a chair made of swords, while I am fighting for the end of everything, and you are too busy killing each other to notice." And the fact that the human characters defeat the Night King and then immediately go back to killing each other over the throne is not a failure of storytelling. It is the story. It is the most Game of Thrones thing the show ever did. Because in this story, human beings do not learn. They survive the apocalypse and then start a new war before the dead are even cold. That is the Night King's legacy. Not the battle, not the death, but the question he forces every character and every viewer to confront. What matters? What is worth fighting for? What would you do if you knew that nothing you built, nothing you loved, nothing you remembered, would survive the coming of the dark? The Night King knows the answer. Nothing matters. That is why he is smiling, if you can call it a smile, as he walks through the Godswood toward Bran. He has already won the argument. He is just waiting for the world to catch up. But there is one more twist to the Night King's story, one more layer that the theories add, and it brings us back to Bran. Because the most audacious, most debated, most divisive theory about the Night King is not about what he wants. It is about who he is, and the answer, according to this theory, is impossible. The Night King is Bran Stark. The theory works like this. We know from the door that Bran can affect the past. We know that when he wargs into someone in the past, the consequences are real and permanent. Wylis became Hodor and stayed Hodor for the rest of his life. The damage was irreversible. The three-eyed raven warned Bran about this. He said that you can get stuck, that if you stay too long in the past, or in someone else's body, you cannot come back. You are trapped. The Bran is the Night King theory proposes that Bran, at some point, attempts to use his powers to go further back in time than he has ever gone before. He tries to go back to the moment of the Night King's creation, thousands of years before the events of the show. He tries to warg into the man that the children of the forest are about to transform. He tries to stop them. He tries to prevent the creation of the White Walkers, to undo the mistake at its source, to fix everything before it begins. And he fails. He gets stuck. Exactly as the three-eyed raven warned, Bran wargs into the man tied to the weirwood tree, and then Leaf drives the dragonglass into his chest, and the transformation begins, and Bran cannot pull out. He is trapped inside the body of the first White Walker as it is born. His consciousness is fused with the creature's. His mind is frozen, encased in ice and magic, corrupted over thousands of years into something unrecognizable. He becomes the Night King. Bran Stark and the Night King are the same person, separated by millennia of cold and silence and rage. The evidence for this theory is suggestive, not conclusive. The show never confirms it. George R.R. Martin has never confirmed it. But the threads are there, woven through the fabric of the story, if you know where to look. Start with the Night King's fixation on Bran. Out of everyone in Westeros, out of every army and every castle and every king and every queen, the Night King's primary target is Bran. He crosses the wall, leads his army to Winterfell, and marches personally into the Godswood to kill a single boy in a wheelchair. Why? The show says it is because Bran is the world's memory, and the Night King wants to erase memory. But the theory offers a different reading. The Night King is drawn to Bran because they are the same consciousness. The Night King is drawn to Bran the way a wound is drawn to the body it belongs to. He is not trying to destroy Bran. He is trying to complete a circuit, to close the loop, to merge with the other half of himself. Then there is the visual evidence. Look at the scene in the door, where the children create the Night King. The man tied to the tree is positioned the same way Bran sits beneath the weirwood when he uses his green sight. Arms on the armrests, back against the trunk. Eyes open, staring into something the camera cannot see. The staging is deliberate. The show is telling you, through the language of cinema, that these two figures are mirrors of each other. One sits beneath a tree and sees everything. The other was born against a tree and wants to destroy everything. They are the same image, inverted. And then there is the moment in Season 6 when the Night King touches Bran during one of his visions. Bran is walking through the army of the dead in a green sight vision, invisible, or so he thinks. And then the Night King turns and looks directly at him, not past him, not through him, at him. And then the Night King reaches out and grabs Bran's arm, leaving a mark that is burned into his skin, a mark that breaks the magical protections around the three-eyed raven's cave. The Night King can see Bran in his visions. The Night King can touch Bran across time and space. The Night King has a connection to Bran that he has with no one else, and the theory says that connection exists because they share the same consciousness. You cannot hide from yourself. The theory also explains something that the show never adequately addresses. Why does Bran become so strange after he inherits the powers of the three-eyed raven? In the earlier seasons, Bran is a warm, curious, emotional child. By Season 7, he is almost affectless. He speaks in monotone. He stares at nothing. He tells people, flat out, that he is not Bran Stark anymore. I remember what it was like to be Brandon Stark, he says in Season 7, but I remember so much else now. The show presents this as the inevitable consequence of seeing all of time at once, of being flooded with so much information that individual identity dissolves. But the theory offers a darker reading. Bran becomes emotionless because part of him, the oldest part of him, the part that has existed for thousands of years as the Night King, is cold. It is ice. It is the opposite of human warmth. And as Bran absorbs the totality of time, he absorbs his own future, or his own past, depending on how you look at it, and that future is the Night King. Bran is not becoming strange because he sees too much. He is becoming strange because he is becoming the thing he will eventually be trapped inside forever. There is a version of Game of Thrones where this theory is confirmed in the final season, where Bran travels back in time, gets trapped, becomes the Night King, and the audience understands that the entire conflict, the war between the living and the dead, was a war between two halves of the same person. One half trying to save the world, the other half, broken and frozen and transformed beyond recognition, trying to end it. That version of the story would have been devastating. It would have given the Night King the tragic dimension that many fans felt he lacked. It would have explained his fixation on Bran. It would have tied together the themes of time and memory and identity that the show had been building since the first season. The show did not go there. The Night King was killed by Arya's dagger. Bran became king. The theory remained unconfirmed, and there are people who will tell you that the show's refusal to confirm the theory was a missed opportunity, that the story would have been richer and more resonant if Bran and the Night King had been revealed as the same being. And there are people who will tell you that the theory is beautiful precisely because it is unconfirmed, that the ambiguity is the point, that a story which explains everything is a story which surprises no one. What is undeniable is that the theory changed how people watch the show. Once you have heard the idea that Bran might be the Night King, you cannot unwatch the scenes between them. Every glance, every moment of connection, every time the Night King seems to know something he should not know, to anticipate something no mere creature of ice should be able to anticipate. The theory sits in the back of your mind like a splinter, and every scene involving Bran or the Night King pushes it a little deeper. That is the power of a good theory. It does not need to be true to change how you experience the story. It just needs to be possible. And the Bran as the Night King theory is possible. The show gave you every tool you need to build it. It just never told you whether the thing you built was the answer or a mirror. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. We have been talking about prophecies and time loops and the nature of evil, but some of the most compelling theories in Game of Thrones are not about the cosmic forces at the edges of the map. They are about the human characters at the center, the people who scheme and suffer and love and kill in the shadow of the Iron Throne. And no character in Game of Thrones is more defined by prophecy, more haunted by a prediction made in her childhood, than Cersei Lannister. The prophecy of the Valonqar is one of the oldest and most debated theories in the entire fandom, and it begins with a fortune teller in a tent. In The Wars to Come, Season 5, Episode 1, which aired on April 12, 2015, the show does something it had never done before. It opens with a flashback. A young Cersei Lannister, maybe 13 or 14 years old, marches through the woods outside Lannisport with a friend, determined and imperious even as a child. They reach a hut in the woods. Inside lives a woman named Maggie, sometimes called Maggie the Frog, a fortune teller, a woman who sees things in the blood. Young Cersei demands her future, and Maggie, reluctantly, gives it to her. "You will not marry the prince," Maggie tells her. "You will marry the king. The king will have 20 children. You will have 3. Gold will be their crowns. Gold will be their shrouds. And the young queen, another queen, younger and more beautiful, will cast you down and take all that you hold dear." In the show, the prophecy stops there. 3 predictions. She will marry the king, not the prince. She will have 3 children, all of whom will die. And a younger, more beautiful queen will take everything from her. Each of these predictions comes true, methodically, over the course of the series. Cersei does not marry Rhaegar Targaryen. She marries Robert Baratheon. Her 3 children, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen, all die. And a younger queen, whether that is Margaery Tyrell or Daenerys Targaryen, does cast her down. But in the books, the prophecy has a 4th part, a part the show chose to leave out. And that part is the one the theory is built on. In the novels, Maggie tells young Cersei one more thing. "And when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you." Valonqar, a High Valyrian word that means little brother. Cersei has spent her entire adult life believing that the Valonqar is Tyrion, her younger brother, the brother she blames for their mother's death, because Joanna Lannister died giving birth to him, the brother she considers a monster, a curse, a misshapen punishment inflicted on her family by cruel gods. From the moment Cersei heard Maggie's prophecy, she has been convinced that Tyrion will kill her. That certainty poisons every interaction they have. It is the reason she hates him so deeply, so irrationally, so completely. She is not just angry at Tyrion for existing, she is afraid of him. She is afraid that his very existence is a death sentence for her. But the theory points out something that Cersei, blinded by her own hatred, fails to see. The prophecy says, the Valonqar, not your Valonqar, not your little brother, just the little brother, any little brother. And Cersei has another little brother, Jaime. He was born after her, making him, technically, her younger twin. Her Valonqar, the man she has loved her entire life, the man she has shared a bed with, shared children with, shared every secret and every sin with, the man who is, in a sense, the other half of her soul. The Jaime as Valonqar theory argues that it is Jaime, not Tyrion, who is destined to kill Cersei. And the evidence in the books is compelling. Jaime's arc across the novels is a story of gradual disillusionment with Cersei. He begins the series as a man who would do anything for her. He pushes a child out of a window to protect their secret. He fights wars, he kills, he loses a hand. And slowly, painfully, he begins to see her clearly. He sees her cruelty, her selfishness, her paranoia, her willingness to burn everything, literally burn it, rather than lose power. And by the end of the 4th novel, Jaime has stopped answering her letters. She writes to him from prison, begging for help, and he burns the letter. He is done. The theory argues that this arc, this trajectory from blind devotion to clear-eyed rejection, points toward an inevitable conclusion. Jaime will return to Cersei one last time. He will see what she has become, and he will wrap his golden hand around her throat and end it. Not out of hatred, out of the same impulse that made him kill the Mad King years ago, to save the realm from a ruler who would rather burn it all than surrender. Jaime is the Kingslayer. The theory says he will also be the Queenslayer, and the symmetry would be devastating. The man who killed one mad monarch to save the city will kill another, and this time, the monarch will be the woman he loves. The show does not deliver this. In The Bells, Season 8, Episode 5, Jaime returns to Cersei, yes. He finds her in the crumbling Red Keep, as Daenerys' dragon burns the city above them. But he does not kill her. He holds her. They stand together in the map room, and the ceiling begins to cave in, and they die together, crushed by falling stone, embracing in the dark beneath the ruins of the castle that was supposed to be their kingdom. Jaime does not strangle her, he does not choke her, he does not fulfill the Valonqar Prophecy in any recognizable way, and the Valonqar Prophecy, which was never included in the show, is never mentioned again. This is one of the most contentious decisions the show made in its final season. Readers who had spent years building the Jaime as Valonqar theory, who had traced every step of his redemption arc, who had watched him move away from Cersei and towards something better, something nobler, something more like the knight he always wanted to be, watched in disbelief as Jaime abandoned Brienne of Tarth in Winterfell and rode south to die in Cersei's arms. The arc did not complete. The theory did not pay off. The Valonqar never came. And yet, there is something in the show's version that the theory does not account for. Something that is, in its own terrible way, more honest than the clean version the theory imagines. Because the show's version of Jaime's ending is not about redemption. It is about addiction. It is about the gravitational pull of a toxic relationship, the way a person can know that something is destroying them and choose it anyway, because the alternative, being free, being alone, being the better version of yourself without the person who makes you worse, is more terrifying than death. Jaime goes back to Cersei not because the plot requires it. He goes back because he cannot stop being Jaime. He cannot outrun the version of himself that loves Cersei. He knows she is a monster. He knows he is a better man without her. And he goes back anyway. Because love, in Game of Thrones, is not the thing that saves you. It is the thing that holds you in place while the ceiling falls. The Valonqar theory is right about the shape of the story. It is right that Jaime is the key to Cersei's ending. It is right that their relationship is the engine of both their arcs. But it is wrong about the mechanism. It imagines Jaime as an instrument of justice, a righteous hand that strangles the monster he helped create. The show imagines him as something more tragic, a man who chooses love over virtue, who chooses the person who ruins him over the person who could save him, who dies not as a hero, but as a man who could not let go. That is not the behavior of a redeemed knight. That is the behavior of someone who is still, after everything, Cersei's twin, her mirror, her other half. And when the stones fall, they fall on both of them, and there is something almost peaceful about it. Not satisfying, not triumphant, but peaceful. As if the two of them were always going to end up in each other's arms, and the only question was whether the world would end first. The gap between the theory and the show's actual ending is one of the most fascinating spaces in the entire Game of Thrones discourse. Because the theory gives you what you want. Justice, symmetry, the Valonqar fulfilling Maggie's prophecy with terrible precision. And the show gives you what the characters need. Not justice, not symmetry, just two people who could never escape each other, dying together in the ruins of everything they built. The Valonqar theory is about prophecy, about fate, about the idea that the future is written and the only question is who gets to read the words. But there is another theory, quieter than the Valonqar, stranger than the Valonqar, that asks a different kind of question entirely, not about what was prophesied, but about what was hidden, about a secret so explosive that if it were true, it would rewrite the history of the most powerful family in Westeros. The theory is called A+J=T, and it asks a question that Tywin Lannister, on his deathbed, might have answered himself. Is Tyrion Lannister actually a Lannister at all? There is a scene near the end of Season 4, in The Children, Season 4, Episode 10, which aired on June 15, 2014, that is among the most important in the entire series. Tyrion, freed from his cell by Jaime, creeps through the tunnels beneath the Red Keep. He finds his way to his father's chambers. He finds Shae in his father's bed, he kills her, and then he takes a crossbow from the wall and goes to the privy, where Tywin Lannister sits, vulnerable, exposed, stripped of every symbol of his power, and Tyrion points the crossbow at him. The dialogue in this scene is extraordinary. Tywin tries to talk his way out of it, the way he has talked his way out of everything. He tells Tyrion he would never have let him be executed. He calls the trial a farce. He reaches for the levers of manipulation that have always worked, and then he makes a mistake. He calls Shae a whore, and Tyrion tells him, "Do not say that word again." And Tywin, because he is Tywin, because he cannot conceive of a world where he does not have the final word, says it again, and Tyrion pulls the trigger. But the line that matters, the line the theory is built on, comes just before the bolt flies. Tywin looks at Tyrion and says, "You are no son of mine." And Tyrion fires. And for most viewers, Tywin's words are exactly what they appear to be: a final insult, a dying man's last act of cruelty toward the child he despised. But the theory asks, what if it is not an insult? What if it is the truth? A+J=T. Aerys Targaryen plus Joanna Lannister equals Tyrion. The theory proposes that Tyrion is not Tywin's biological son, that he is the product of an affair, or worse, an assault, committed by King Aerys II Targaryen, the Mad King, upon Tywin's wife Joanna. And the evidence, mostly drawn from the books, is more substantial than you might expect. In George R.R. Martin's novels, Sir Barristan Selmy tells Daenerys that Aerys was long obsessed with Joanna Lannister. He took liberties with her during the bedding ceremony at her wedding to Tywin, liberties that went beyond what was customary and that deeply angered Tywin. Aerys was known to have made crude remarks about Joanna, publicly wondering whether her breasts had changed after she nursed Jaime and Cersei. The relationship between Aerys and Tywin, once close, deteriorated steadily over the years, and historians within the world of the novels cite Aerys's behavior toward Joanna as one of the primary reasons. The theory argues that at some point, Aerys went further than remarks, that he assaulted Joanna, and that the product of that assault was Tyrion. This would explain, the theory suggests, several otherwise puzzling aspects of the story. It would explain why Tywin hates Tyrion so completely. Yes, Tyrion is a dwarf, and yes, Joanna died giving birth to him, and those are reasons enough for a man like Tywin to resent his son. But the depth of Tywin's contempt goes beyond resentment. It is existential. Tywin does not merely dislike Tyrion. He refuses to acknowledge him. He strips him of his inheritance. He sentences him to death. And he says, with his last breath, "You are no son of mine." The theory argues that this hatred makes more sense if Tywin knows, or suspects, that Tyrion is literally not his son. That every time Tywin looks at Tyrion, he sees not just a disappointment, but the evidence of his own humiliation. The proof that the Mad King took something from him that he could never take back. It would explain Tyrion's physical appearance. In the books, Tyrion's description is different from the show. On screen, Peter Dinklage brings warmth and charisma to the role, but in the novels, Tyrion is described as having mismatched eyes, one green and one black, and hair so pale it is almost white. The Lannister look is golden. Golden hair, green eyes, the beauty that Jaime and Cersei share. Tyrion has none of it. His pale, nearly white hair echoes the Targaryen silver. His mismatched eyes suggest mixed heritage. He does not look like a Lannister. The theory argues that he does not look like a Lannister because he is not, fully, a Lannister. It would explain Tyrion's fascination with dragons. From childhood, Tyrion is obsessed with dragons. He reads every book about them. He dreams about them. When he finally meets Daenerys' dragons in Season 6, in Home, Season 6, Episode 2, which aired on April 24, 2016, he walks into the dungeon beneath the Great Pyramid of Meereen and unchains them, and they do not burn him. They could kill him in an instant. They are wild, dangerous, enormous creatures chained in the dark, and they let him touch them. They let him remove their chains. The theory argues that they recognize him, that dragon blood knows dragon blood, and it would give a new dimension to the story's central thematic concern. Game of Thrones is a story about fathers and children, about the weight of heritage, about the distance between who you are and who your family tells you to be. Tyrion's entire arc is about struggling against the identity his father imposes on him. Tywin tells him he is a disgrace, a stain on the Lannister name, a creature to be endured rather than loved, and Tyrion fights against this, constantly, but he can never fully escape it, because no matter what he accomplishes, no matter how clever, or how brave, or how kind he is still Tywin's son. The identity follows him like a shadow. But if he is not Tywin's son, if his true father is the Mad King, then the shadow is different. It is darker. It is more dangerous. Because the Mad King was not just a bad father. He was a monster. He burned people alive for entertainment. He was paranoid, cruel, and ultimately insane. And the theory asks, is Tyrion's love of wildfire, his willingness to use it at the Battle of the Blackwater in Season 2, his talent for destruction dressed up as strategy, is that a Lannister trait, or is it a Targaryen one? The counter-arguments are strong, and they deserve their space. Many readers and fans reject the theory on thematic grounds, arguing that making Tyrion a secret Targaryen undermines the most powerful dynamic in the story. The entire point of Tyrion and Tywin's relationship, they argue, is that Tyrion is Tywin's son, not despite the hatred, but because of it. Tyrion is the child who most resembles Tywin. He is the most intelligent, the most politically savvy, the most ruthlessly effective Lannister of his generation, and Tywin cannot see it because he cannot see past the dwarfism and the dead wife. The tragedy of their relationship is that the son Tywin should have been proudest of is the son he despises most. And that tragedy only works if Tyrion is actually Tywin's son. If he is not, if he is a Targaryen, then Tywin was right to reject him, and the emotional engine of their story stalls. George R.R. Martin has never confirmed or denied the theory. He is careful about such things. He gives you enough evidence to build the case, but never enough to close it. And the show, for its part, never addresses the theory at all. Tyrion is treated as a Lannister throughout. His Targaryen potential is never explored. The dragon scene in Meereen is ambiguous, but never followed up on. And Tyrion's ending, as Bran's Hand of the King, makes no reference to hidden bloodlines or secret parentage. The theory remains, like so many theories about Game of Thrones, beautifully unresolved. It is a door that the story opens just wide enough for you to peer through, but never wide enough for you to walk through. And the question it raises, the question of whether Tyrion is a lion or a dragon, whether his cleverness and his cruelty and his capacity for destruction come from Tywin or from Aerys, is one of those questions that enriches the story regardless of the answer, because the question itself forces you to look at Tyrion differently, to examine every scene, every choice, every moment of violence and every moment of tenderness, through a lens that shifts the light just enough to see new shadows. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The theories we have discussed so far deal with individual characters, with Jon's parentage, with Daenerys' madness, with Bran's powers, with Cersei's prophecy, with Tyrion's blood. But some of the most fascinating theories in Game of Thrones are not about individuals at all. They are about collectives, about the invisible networks of loyalty and deception that operate beneath the surface of the story, connecting characters who appear to be enemies but might, secretly, be working toward the same goal. And the most elaborate, most satisfying, most intricately argued of these collective theories is the Grand Northern Conspiracy. The Grand Northern Conspiracy is, at its core, a theory about loyalty, about the loyalty that the northern houses of Westeros feel toward House Stark, and about the lengths they are willing to go to, the deceptions they are willing to maintain, the sacrifices they are willing to make, to restore the Starks to power after the Red Wedding nearly destroyed them. Here is the context. After the Red Wedding in the Reigns of Castamere, Season 3, Episode 9, which aired on June 2, 2013, the Stark cause appears to be finished. Robb is dead. Catelyn is dead. The Stark army is scattered. Winterfell is a burned ruin, sacked by Theon Greyjoy and then torched by the Boltons. The Boltons, under Roose Bolton, have been elevated to Wardens of the North by the Lannisters as a reward for betraying the Starks at the Red Wedding, and Walder Frey sits in his castle at the Twins, fat and smirking, having violated the most sacred law in Westeros, the law of guest right, the law that says you do not harm a guest who has eaten your bread and salt under your roof. The northern houses bow. They accept Bolton rule. They attend the wedding of Ramsay Bolton to a girl the Boltons claim is Arya Stark, though in the books, the girl is actually Jane Poole, a friend of Sansa's, passed off as a Stark to legitimize the Bolton claim. On the surface, the North has accepted its new masters. The Starks are gone. The Boltons have won. But the theory says no. The theory says the North has not accepted anything. The theory says that beneath the surface of compliance, a vast, coordinated conspiracy is at work. That nearly every northern house, the Manderleys, the Umbers, the Mormonts, the Mountain Clans, perhaps even some of the Dustins, is secretly working to destroy the Boltons and restore the Starks. That they are playing a long game, a patient game, a game that requires them to smile at the people they hate and sharpen their knives behind their backs. The centerpiece of the theory is Lord Wyman Manderley of White Harbor. Manderley is, in the books, one of the great characters of A Song of Ice and Fire. He is enormously fat. He is loud and seemingly foolish. He laughs too much and drinks too much, and appears to be exactly the kind of man that the Boltons and Freys believe him to be, a harmless buffoon, a lord too concerned with his belly to cause trouble. But beneath the performance, Manderley is a man consumed by rage and driven by a patience so absolute it is almost frightening. In A Dance with Dragons, Manderley reveals his true intentions to Davos Seaworth. He tells Davos that he knows the truth about the Red Wedding. He knows that the Freys murdered his son Wendell. He knows that the Boltons betrayed the Starks. And he says words that became one of the most famous lines in the entire book series. The North remembers, Lord Davos. The North remembers, and the Mummers' farce is almost done. The theory argues that Manderley is not acting alone. He is the visible tip of an enormous iceberg. The Umbers, who in the books appear to have divided their house, with one faction supporting the Boltons and another supporting Stannis, may be running a coordinated deception. The Mountain Clans, who march with Stannis through blizzards that kill half their men, do so not out of loyalty to Stannis, but out of loyalty to Ned Stark's memory. They say it plainly. Ned's little girl is in there, they say, meaning the girl the Boltons claim is Arya Stark. We are here for her. And then there are the Frey pies. This is the detail that elevates the Grand Northern Conspiracy from theory to dark poetry. Manderly, when he travels to Winterfell for Ramsay's wedding, brings with him 3 enormous meat pies. Pork, he says, 3 pies for the feast. And during the feast, 3 Frey envoys who traveled with Manderly are conspicuously absent. They never arrived at Winterfell. They vanished on the road between White Harbor and Winterfell. And Manderly eats his pies with gusto, his jowls slick with grease, asking the bard to play the Song of the Rat Cook, the legendary Night's Watch brother who baked a king's son into a pie and was cursed by the gods for violating guest right. The implication is unmistakable. Manderly killed the 3 Freys and baked them into the pies he served at the Bolton wedding feast. He is feeding the Boltons and Freys their own allies, and he is doing it with a smile on his face, because Manderly is a man who understands that the most devastating acts of vengeance are the ones your enemies do not even know are happening. The show adapts elements of this theory but simplifies them considerably. In the show, it is Arya who bakes the Frey pies, serving them to Walder Frey in Season 6, Episode 10, The Winds of Winter. Arya kills 2 of Walder's sons, bakes them into a pie, and serves the pie to Walder before slitting his throat. The North does remember, but in the show's version, it is a Stark who does the remembering, not a consortium of lords working in secret. The show's treatment of the Northern Conspiracy is most visible in Season 6, in the lead-up to the Battle of the Bastards, Season 6, Episode 9, which aired on June 19, 2016. Jon Snow and Sansa Stark travel from castle to castle, trying to rally the northern houses to their cause, and what they find is dispiriting. Most of the houses refuse. The Umbers have given Rickon to Ramsay. The Karstarks are openly Bolton loyalists. Only the Mormonts, led by the 10-year-old Lady Lyanna Mormont, offer their support, along with a handful of free folk who follow Jon. The grand conspiracy of the books, the vast network of secret Stark loyalists, is reduced in the show to a handful of loyal houses and a last-minute rescue by the Knights of the Vale. But the spirit of the theory survives, even in the show's streamlined version, because the moment that matters, the moment that captures everything the Grand Northern Conspiracy is about, comes after the battle. Jon has won. Ramsay is defeated. Winterfell is reclaimed. And in the Great Hall, surrounded by the Lords of the North, young Lyanna Mormont stands up and delivers a speech that shames every lord who refused to fight. She looks at them, this child, this girl who is smaller than most of their swords, and she says, in essence, that she does not care what they did before. She knows a king when she sees one, and she declares Jon Snow the king in the north, and the other lords follow. One by one they rise, they draw their swords, they chant, "The king in the north, the king in the north." And it is thrilling, and it is emotional, and it is the show's version of the Grand Northern Conspiracy paying off. Not through secret machinations, not through Frey pies and hidden alliances, but through the simpler, more direct mechanism of loyalty revealed. The North remembers. The North waited. And when the moment came, the North chose the Starks. The Grand Northern Conspiracy is one of those theories that is arguably better in the books than in the show, because the books have the space and the complexity to develop the web of deceptions and counter-deceptions that the theory requires. The show, constrained by time and by the need to keep its story comprehensible to a mass audience, cannot afford a dozen lords playing elaborate games of deception across multiple episodes. It needs a battle. It needs a climax. It needs Ramsay's dogs eating his face in the kennel of Winterfell, while Sansa watches and smiles. But the theory endures because it speaks to something fundamental about Game of Thrones, the idea that loyalty does not die just because the people you are loyal to appear to be defeated. The idea that power is not just who sits on the throne, but who the people actually serve in their hearts. The idea that the Boltons could hold Winterfell, could claim the title of Warden of the North, could torture and terrorize and rule by fear, and none of it would matter, because the North remembers. The North always remembers. And when the time comes, the North chooses Stark. There is something deeply satisfying about that, not because it is surprising, but because it is inevitable. Because the show has spent years showing you why the northern houses love the Starks. Ned's honor, Robb's courage, the way the Starks treat their bannermen not as subjects but as family. The Grand Northern Conspiracy is the theory that says all of that matters, that loyalty is not a weakness in Game of Thrones. It is the one thing that outlasts everything else. It outlasts betrayal. It outlasts murder. It outlasts the Boltons and the Freys and the Lannisters and everyone else who ever tried to take the North by force. The North remembers, and that is enough. Now, there is one more theory that must be discussed before we reach the end of this particular chapter of the Game of Thrones story, and it is perhaps the most purely entertaining of all of them. A theory that existed for years as a half-joke, a rallying cry, a meme that took on a life of its own, until the show itself had no choice but to deliver on it. Cleganebowl, the Hound versus the Mountain, Sandor versus Gregor. Brother against brother, in a fight that the fans willed into existence through sheer collective desire. The Clegane brothers are two of the most physically imposing characters in Game of Thrones. Gregor Clegane, the Mountain that rides, is the largest and most terrifying knight in Westeros. He is a wall of muscle and armor and violence, a man who kills without hesitation and without remorse, a man who murdered Elia Martell and her children during the sack of King's Landing, who crushed Oberyn Martell's skull with his bare hands in the trial by combat in Season 4. He is, by any reasonable definition, a monster. Sandor Clegane, the Hound, is his younger brother, smaller but still enormous by any normal standard, scarred, literally, by Gregor's cruelty. When Sandor was a child, Gregor held his face in a fire for playing with one of Gregor's toys. The burns cover half of Sandor's face and define his entire life, his hatred of fire, his hatred of knights, and the lies they tell about honor, his hatred of his brother and everything his brother represents. Sandor is one of the most complex characters in the show, a man who does terrible things but is capable of unexpected tenderness, a man who protects Sansa and then Arya, a man who dies and is brought back, not by magic, but by the simple kindness of a Septon who found his body and nursed him back to health. The theory of Cleganebowl is simple. The brothers will fight. The show will deliver on the decades of hatred between them. Sandor will face Gregor, and one or both of them will die. The evidence that the show was building toward this confrontation accumulated over the years. Every time the Hound returned to the story after his apparent death in Season 4, the possibility of Cleganebowl grew stronger. When Sandor joined the Brotherhood without banners, when he marched north to fight the dead, when he survived the Battle of Winterfell. Every step brought him closer to King's Landing, closer to Cersei, and closer to the Mountain, who by this point had been transformed by Qyburn's experiments into something barely human, a hulking, silent, undead bodyguard who never removed his helmet and never spoke. The confrontation comes in The Bells, Season 8, Episode 5, which aired on May 12, 2019. As Daenerys' dragon burns King's Landing, as the Red Keep crumbles, the Hound climbs the steps of the castle toward his brother. He encounters Arya, who has come to kill Cersei, and he does something that is, for Sandor Clegane, more heroic than any sword fight. He tells Arya to leave. He tells her not to be like him. He tells her that revenge will consume her the way it has consumed him. "You want to be like me?" he says, essentially. "Look at me." And Arya, for the first and perhaps only time in the series, listens. She turns back. She walks away from vengeance. And the Hound walks toward it. The fight itself is everything the fans wanted, and nothing like what they expected. It is not a clean duel. It is not a tournament. It is a brutal, ugly, desperate brawl on a crumbling staircase while the world burns around them. The Mountain is barely human. He shrugs off wounds that would kill any normal man. Sandor stabs him through the head, and Gregor does not die. Sandor drives a sword through his gut, and Gregor does not die. Because Gregor is already dead, he has been dead since Qyburn reanimated him, and the Hound realizes, in the middle of the fight, that he cannot kill something that is already dead, not with a sword. So he does the one thing that terrifies him more than anything else in the world. He uses fire. Sandor Clegane, the man whose face was burned by his brother when he was a child, the man who has been afraid of fire his entire life, tackles his brother and throws both of them off the side of the Red Keep into the inferno below. He kills Gregor with fire. He kills himself with fire. He faces his deepest fear and uses it as a weapon, and the price is his own life. Cleganebowl is the theory that proves that sometimes the most obvious prediction is also the most satisfying one. There is no twist. There is no subversion. The brothers fight. The brothers die. The Hound gets his revenge, and it costs him everything. And the audience, who had been chanting "Get hype" on internet forums for years, watched it happen and felt something far more complex than hype. They felt the weight of a lifetime of pain, concentrated into a single act of mutual destruction, played out against the backdrop of a city in flames. That is not a small thing. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. We have traveled a long way through the theories of Game of Thrones, from Jon's parentage to the prophecy of Azor Ahai, from the Mad Queen to the time-traveling Bran, from the Night King's purpose to the Valonqar's identity, from secret Targaryens to northern conspiracies to two brothers killing each other on a staircase while the world ends. And there is one more theory, one more thread, that ties many of these together. It is the theory of Lightbringer, not the sword, the concept, the idea that the central prophecy of Game of Thrones, the prophecy of a hero who saves the world through sacrifice, is not a literal prediction about a flaming sword, but a metaphor for something far more painful and far more true. Remember the legend. Azor Ahai forged Lightbringer 3 times. The first time, he tempered the blade in water, and it broke. The second time, he drove it through the heart of a lion, and it broke. The third time, he drove it through the heart of his wife, Nissa, and it held. Her soul and her love and her courage flowed into the steel, and the sword burst into flame, and with that sword, he saved the world. 3 attempts, 3 failures, 2 of them material, 1 of them human, and the human sacrifice is the one that works. The theory argues that this is not a story about a sword. It is a story about what it costs to save the world. And the cost, according to the legend, is not gold or steel or fire. It is love. You have to destroy the thing you love most. You have to drive your sword through the heart of the person who matters more to you than anything, and from that act of impossible cruelty, something beautiful and terrible is born, a weapon that can drive back the darkness, a light that burns because it is fueled by grief. Now apply that to Game of Thrones. Apply the 3 forgings of Lightbringer to the 3 great acts of sacrifice in the show. The first forging, water. Some readers have argued that the first forging represents Robb Stark's campaign. Robb takes his army south to fight the Lannisters. He wins every battle. He never loses on the field. But his blade breaks. It breaks because of the phrase, because of the Boltons, because of the betrayal at the Red Wedding. The sword tempered in water shatters. The first attempt to save the North ends in blood and ruin. The second forging, a lion. This is Tyrion's arc, or Jaime's, or both. The lion is the Lannister sigil, and the theory argues that the second attempt to forge Lightbringer, to create a force capable of saving the world, requires confronting the Lannisters, driving a blade through the heart of the lion. Tyrion kills his father. Jaime kills the Mad King. Decades before the story begins. The lion is pierced, but the sword still breaks, because killing the Lannisters does not save the world. It just changes who sits on the throne. The third forging. Nissa, the wife, the lover, the person you cannot bear to lose. And here the theory focuses on Jon Snow, because Jon is the character who, in the final season, must drive a blade through the heart of the woman he loves, not to forge a sword, but to save the world. In the series finale, The Iron Throne, Season 8, Episode 6, which aired on May 19, 2019, Jon goes to Daenerys in the destroyed throne room of the Red Keep. She is standing before the Iron Throne, the throne she has spent her entire life trying to reach. The city is in ashes around her. Hundreds of thousands are dead. She has won, and the cost of her victory is everything. And Jon looks at her and sees what she has become, and he knows what he has to do. He kisses her, he tells her she is his queen, and then he drives a dagger into her heart. That is Lightbringer. Not a flaming sword, not a weapon forged in fire. A man killing the woman he loves because she has become the thing the world needs to be saved from. Nissa's cry of anguish and ecstasy, the legend says, left a crack across the face of the moon. And Jon Snow's act of murder leaves a crack across the face of everything the audience believed about this story. About heroism, about love, about the idea that the good guys win and the people you love survive and the ending is happy. The theory of Lightbringer is the theory that says Game of Thrones was never going to have a happy ending. It was always going to end with a sacrifice. It was always going to end with someone losing the person they loved most. Because that is what the legend of Azor Ahai tells you, right from the beginning. if you are willing to hear it. Saving the world is not free. It is not clean. It is not heroic in the way that stories usually mean when they use that word. It is a man with a knife in his hand, looking at the woman he loves, knowing that the only way to stop her is to become the kind of person who kills the people they love, and doing it anyway, and living with it for the rest of his life. Jon does not wield Lightbringer after he kills Daenerys. He does not ride out against the darkness with a flaming sword. He is arrested. He is imprisoned. He is exiled. He goes back to the Wall, back to the north, back to the place where his story began, and he walks beyond the Wall with the free folk, and he disappears into the trees, and the show ends. He saved the world, and the world punished him for it. He made the sacrifice the prophecy demanded, and his reward was exile, not glory, not gratitude, exile. That is the final, devastating irony of the Lightbringer theory. The prophecy was true, the sacrifice was real. The blade was forged in the heart of a loved one, and it drove back the darkness. But there is no triumph in it. There is no celebration. There is just a man walking into the snow, carrying the weight of what he did, and a world that will never fully understand the price he paid to save it. The theory of Lightbringer is, in the end, a theory about what Game of Thrones is trying to say about heroism, and what it says is this. Heroism is not a story you tell yourself before the battle. It is not a prophecy you fulfill with a clean heart and a steady hand. Heroism is the thing that remains after you have given up everything, after you have done the thing you cannot forgive yourself for, after you have driven the blade into the heart of the person you love and watched the light go out of their eyes. Heroism is not the sword. Heroism is the wound, and the wound never heals. That understanding is what separates Game of Thrones from every other fantasy story ever told. Not the politics, not the dragons, not the betrayals. The understanding that the hero's journey does not end with the hero on a throne, but with the hero in the snow, alone, carrying a blade that was forged in grief. There is a quiet thread running through Game of Thrones that most viewers overlook in favor of the louder, more dramatic theories. It does not involve prophecies or time travel or secret bloodlines. It involves a question that the show poses in its very first scene and does not answer until its very last. The question is this: what is Bran Stark? And by the time the show answers that question, the answer is so unexpected, so strange, so seemingly disconnected from everything the audience thought the show was about, that many people refuse to accept it. The theory of Bran becoming king is one that very few fans predicted, and yet, when you trace the threads backward, it might be the most carefully seeded reveal in the entire series. Think back to the very beginning, the pilot episode. Winter is coming. Bran Stark is a boy who wants to be a knight. He wants to climb, he wants to fight, he wants to be like his father and his brothers. And then Jaime Lannister pushes him out of a window, and everything changes. Bran loses the use of his legs. He loses his future as a warrior. He loses, in a sense, the life he was supposed to live. And from that moment of destruction, a different life begins. A life defined not by physical power, but by sight, by knowledge, by the ability to see things that no one else can see. The show sends Bran on a journey that mirrors the hero's journey in classical mythology, but inverts it at every turn. Instead of going south to fight for the throne, Bran goes north, beyond the Wall, into the frozen wilderness where the rules of the world break down. Instead of gaining a sword, he gains vision. Instead of conquering enemies, he absorbs their memories. Instead of becoming a king through combat, he becomes something else entirely. He becomes the three-eyed raven, the living memory of the world, a being that is, in some fundamental way, no longer Bran Stark at all. And then, in the series finale, Tyrion Lannister proposes that this being, this strange, unsettling, seemingly emotionless entity that was once a boy who wanted to be a knight, should be king, not because he is a warrior, not because he has an army, not because he has a claim to the throne by blood or conquest, but because he has the best story. What unites people? Tyrion asks, standing before the assembled lords and ladies of Westeros. Armies, gold, flags, stories. There is nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it. No enemy can defeat it. And who has a better story than Bran the Broken? Many viewers rejected this. They found it unsatisfying, absurd, a non sequitur in a show that had spent 8 seasons telling them that power grows from the barrel of a dragon's mouth, not from the pages of a storybook. But the theory of Bran as king, examined closely, reveals something that the show had been building toward with more care than most people gave it credit for. Consider what the show tells you about every other form of power. Military power, the power of armies and swords and dragons, leads to an endless cycle of violence. Robert overthrew the Targaryens and sat on the throne for 17 miserable years before being killed by a boar. Joffrey ruled through cruelty and was murdered at his own wedding. The Boltons seized the north through treachery and were destroyed within a few years. Cersei blew up the Great Sept of Baelor to eliminate her enemies, and then watched as her victory turned to ashes. Daenerys conquered everything with her dragons, and became the thing she had fought against her entire life. Every character who seeks the throne through force either fails to hold it, or is destroyed by the effort of holding it. Political power, the power of alliances and marriages and manipulation, is equally hollow. Littlefinger is the most skilled political manipulator in the show, and he ends up with his throat slit in the Great Hall of Winterfell. Varys plays the long game for decades and is burned alive by dragonfire. Tywin is the most powerful political figure in Westeros and is killed on the privy by his own son. Every political schemer in Game of Thrones ends the same way: outmaneuvered, outwitted, dead. The only power that survives, the show argues, is the power of story, the power of memory, the power of knowing what has happened and why. And Bran is the embodiment of that power. He does not fight, he does not scheme, he does not manipulate, or conquer, or burn. He sits beneath a tree and he sees everything, and that sight, that memory, that accumulated knowledge of every mistake and every triumph and every act of cruelty and every act of grace that has ever occurred in the history of Westeros makes him, in Tyrion's argument, the only person fit to rule. The theory that Bran was always meant to be king gains support from some surprising places. George R.R. Martin has stated that the broad strokes of the show's ending reflect the ending he has planned for the books. Bran becoming king is, apparently, one of those broad strokes. And when you know that this is Martin's ending, not just the show's ending, it changes how you read the entire story. Every scene with Bran becomes a scene about the future king. Every vision becomes an act of statecraft. Every moment of loss, every step of the long, cold journey north and then back again, becomes part of the preparation for rule. There is a version of this theory that goes even darker, that asks whether Bran, as the three-eyed raven, manipulated events to ensure his own ascension. That the reason Bran seems so passive in the final season, so uninvolved, so strangely calm about the end of the world, is that he already knows the outcome. He has already seen it. He knows Arya will kill the Night King. He knows Jon will kill Daenerys. He knows Tyrion will nominate him as king. And he does nothing to prevent any of the suffering that leads to these outcomes, because he needs the suffering to happen. He needs Daenerys to burn King's Landing, because that creates the power vacuum that puts him on the throne. He needs Jon to kill Daenerys, because that removes the last rival. He needs the war to devastate Westeros, because a devastated Westeros will accept a strange, quiet boy as king when a healthy Westeros never would. This version of the theory casts Bran not as a hero, but as the most patient and most terrible player of the Game of Thrones. A player who does not use swords or dragons or gold. A player who uses time itself, who has seen every possible future and chosen the one that leads to his own power, and who sits in his wheelchair with those unsettling, knowing eyes and says, "Why do you think I came all this way?" when Tyrion nominates him. That line, that single line, "Why do you think I came all this way?" Is it a joke? Is it an admission? Is it the confession of a godlike being who engineered the deaths of thousands to put himself on a throne he claims he does not want? The show does not answer this. It leaves the question hanging, like so many of its best questions, in the silence between what is said and what is meant. And the theory lives in that silence. It grows in that silence. And years after the show ended, people are still debating what Bran meant, what Bran knew, what Bran did or did not do, and whether the boy who fell from the tower in the first episode was always destined to sit on the throne in the last. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a theory about Game of Thrones that is less a specific prediction and more a framework, a way of reading the entire story through a single lens. It is the theory of the three heads of the dragon, and it connects to one of the oldest prophecies in the world, of a song of ice and fire. The dragon has three heads, 3 riders for 3 dragons, 3 Targaryens, or 3 people with Targaryen blood, who will each bond with one of Daenerys' 3 dragons, and ride them into battle against the darkness. The prophecy comes from Rhaegar Targaryen himself. In Daenerys' vision in the House of the Undying, in the books, she sees Rhaegar holding his newborn son and saying, "The dragon has 3 heads." Rhaegar was obsessed with prophecy. He believed, at various points in his life, that he himself was the prince that was promised, and later, that his children would be the 3 heads of the dragon. When his wife Elia Martell could not bear a 3rd child, some theorists believe Rhaegar's pursuit of Lyanna Stark was driven not by love alone, but by the desperate need to produce a 3rd child, a 3rd head, to fulfill the prophecy he believed in more deeply than anything else. The 3 heads theory, as fans developed it, proposed that the 3 dragon riders would be Daenerys, Jon Snow, and Tyrion. Daenerys is a Targaryen by birth, the mother of dragons, the obvious 1st head. Jon, once his parentage is revealed, is the 2nd, the son of Rhaegar, a Targaryen by blood, if not by name. And Tyrion, if the A+J=T theory is correct, would be the 3rd, the secret son of Aerys, a Targaryen hidden behind a Lannister name. 3 Targaryens, 3 dragons, 3 heads. The symmetry is elegant. It connects 3 of the show's central characters through bloodline and prophecy, and transforms their individual stories into chapters of a single, mythic narrative. The bastard, the exile, and the dwarf. The outcasts of 3 great houses, united by the secret they share, riding dragons into the final battle. The show delivers on this prophecy partially and obliquely. Daenerys rides Drogon. Jon rides Rhaegal, briefly, in Season 8. Tyrion never rides a dragon. The 3 heads theory, like so many theories about Game of Thrones, is too neat for the story the show ultimately tells. The show is not interested in neat prophecies. It is interested in the mess that happens when prophecies collide with human nature. But the theory matters not because it was confirmed, but because of what it reveals about the architecture of the story. Martin built a world where prophecy exists, where the future casts shadows backward into the present, where ancient legends encode truths that the characters spend their entire lives trying to decipher. And the 3 heads theory is one of the grandest examples of fans doing exactly what the characters do, looking at the prophecy, studying the clues, trying to decode the pattern, and arriving at an answer that is beautiful and logical and wrong in exactly the ways that prophecies are always wrong, not because the prophecy is false, but because the truth it encodes is not the truth anyone expected. Rhaegar believed the dragon had 3 heads. Rhaegar died on the trident, rubies scattering from his breastplate into the river, and his belief died with him. And the 3 dragons that eventually hatched, the 3 dragons that Rhaegar's prophecy anticipated, did not unite 3 Targaryen riders in a triumphant battle against the darkness. One was killed by the Night King and resurrected as an ice dragon, one was shot down by Euron Greyjoy's scorpion bolts, and the last burned a city to ash. The dragon had 3 heads, and all 3 of those heads ended in tragedy. That is the show's relationship with prophecy in a single image. The prophecy is true. The prophecy comes to pass. And the fulfillment of the prophecy is nothing like what anyone imagined. There is one more layer to the theory of the Stark children that deserves attention, and it connects to a dimension of the story that the show largely abandoned, but that the books explore in detail. The Stark children are all wargs, not just Bran, all of them. In the novels, every Stark child, Robb, Sansa, Arya, Bran, and Rickon, has a connection to their direwolf that goes beyond the bond between a pet and its owner. They dream through their wolves' eyes. They feel what their wolves feel. They see what their wolves see. The wolves are not companions. They are extensions of the Stark's consciousness. They are the mystical inheritance of the first men, the ability to enter the minds of animals, expressed in its purest form through the bond between a Stark and their direwolf. The show acknowledges this with Bran, whose warging ability is central to his story. It hints at it with Jon, who in the books wargs into ghost frequently, and in the show shares significant, wordless moments with his direwolf that suggest a bond deeper than training. But with the other Stark children, the show largely drops this thread. Sansa's direwolf, Lady, is killed in Season 1, and with her death, Sansa's connection to the mystical side of the Stark heritage is severed. Robb's wolf, Greywind, dies with him at the Red Wedding. Rickon's wolf, Shaggy Dog, is killed off-screen. Only Arya's Nymeria survives, released into the wild in Season 1, and glimpsed briefly in Season 7, leading a pack of wolves in the Riverlands. The theory of the Stark wargs argues that the direwolves are the key to understanding the Stark's story. They are not narrative accessories. They are not cute additions to make the Starks more sympathetic. They are symbols of the Starks' true nature, their connection to the old gods, to the children of the forest, to the deep magic of Westeros that exists beneath the surface of the political drama. And the death of a Stark's direwolf is not just a sad moment. It is a severing, a cutting of the cord that connects that Stark to their deepest identity. Look at what happens to each Stark after their wolf is gone. Sansa loses Lady and is, for the next several seasons, a victim. She is manipulated by the Lannisters, by Littlefinger, by the Boltons. She is cut off from her family, from her home, from everything that makes her a Stark. And it is only when she returns to Winterfell, to the Heart Tree, to the land where the old gods still have power, that she begins to reclaim her identity. Robb loses Grey Wind at the Red Wedding, and the phrase "sew the wolf's head onto Robb's body," a final desecration that symbolizes the destruction of the Stark-Wolf bond. Rickon loses Shaggy Dog and then runs in a straight line toward Jon, while Ramsay shoots arrows at him, dying a death that many viewers found frustratingly pointless, as if the loss of his wolf stripped him of the very instinct that might have saved him. The theory argues that this pattern is intentional, that George R.R. Martin designed the direwolves as more than symbols, that the death of a direwolf is a narrative signal that the Stark it belongs to has lost something essential, something that cannot be replaced, something that connects them to the magical underpinnings of the world. And the Starks who keep their wolves, Bran and Jon and Arya, are the Starks who retain their agency, their power, their ability to shape the world around them. Bran becomes the three-eyed raven, Jon is resurrected from the dead, Arya becomes a faceless assassin. The wolves survive, the Starks survive, the bond endures. This reading transforms the direwolves from supporting characters into the spine of the story. The Starks are not just a noble family fighting for survival. They are the last inheritors of a magical tradition that stretches back thousands of years, to the pact between the first men and the children of the forest, to the building of the wall, to the original Long Night, and the direwolves are the physical manifestation of that inheritance. When Ned Stark finds the direwolf mother dead in the first episode, killed by a stag, it is not just an omen, it is a thesis statement. The stag, the Baratheon sigil, kills the wolf. The political world of Westeros kills the magical world of Westeros. And the orphan direwolf pups, adopted by the Stark children, are the last hope that the magical world might survive. Consider Arya's wolf, Nymeria. In Season 1, Arya chases Nymeria away to save the wolf from being killed by the Lannisters after Nymeria bites Joffrey. It is an act of sacrifice. Arya gives up her companion to protect her, and for 6 seasons Nymeria is gone. She is out there, somewhere, in the wilderness of the Riverlands, but the show does not follow her. She is a ghost, an absence, a hole in Arya's story that is shaped exactly like a wolf. And then, in Season 7, Episode 2, Stormborn, which aired on July 23, 2017, Arya finds Nymeria again. She is camped in the woods, and the wolves come out of the trees, dozens of them, led by Nymeria, who is enormous now, wild, leading a pack. Arya looks at her wolf and says, "Come with me." And Nymeria looks back and turns away. She walks back into the trees. She will not come. And Arya watches her go and says, quietly, "That is not you." It is a callback to a line Arya herself said in Season 1, when Ned told her she would marry a lord and rule a castle. "That is not me," Arya said then. And now, watching her wolf choose the wild over domestication, she understands. Nymeria has become what Arya became, an outsider, a wanderer, a creature that answers to no one. The wolf is the mirror of the girl. The show, constrained by the realities of CGI budgets and the difficulty of working with animal performers, could not give the direwolves the screen time they deserved. Ghost appears less and less as the seasons progress. Nymeria's return in Season 7 is a single scene. The wolves become afterthoughts in a story that, in the books, treats them as central. And the theory of the Stark wargs is, in part, a lament for what the show left on the table. For the version of Game of Thrones where the wolves mattered as much as the dragons, where the magical inheritance of the Starks was given the same weight as the magical inheritance of the Targaryens, where the Song of Ice and Fire was not just about Targaryen blood and Stark honor, but about the deep, primal, wordless bond between a child and a wolf, running together through the forests of the north, seeing through each other's eyes, dreaming each other's dreams. That version of the story exists in the books, still unfinished, still waiting for George R.R. Martin to complete it. And the theory argues that when, if, the books are finished, The Stark wargs will be at the center of the ending, not on the margins, not as decoration, at the center, because the wolves are the Starks. And the Starks are the wolves, and the Song of Ice and Fire cannot be sung without both voices. There is a detail in Game of Thrones that appears in the very first scene of the very first episode, and that the show returns to, again and again, for 8 seasons, without ever fully explaining what it means. The White Walkers leave patterns. They arrange the bodies of their victims into shapes, spirals, lines radiating from a center point, symbols that look ancient, that look deliberate, that look like they mean something, and that the show never translates into plain language. The first time you see it is in Winter is Coming, the pilot. The Night's Watch Rangers find a camp of wildlings north of the wall. The wildlings are dead, and their bodies have been arranged into a pattern, a circle, a spiral, something that was placed with care by whatever killed them. The Rangers are horrified, but they do not understand what they are seeing. They cannot read the message. They do not even know it is a message. The spirals return throughout the series. In Season 3, when Jon and the wildlings find the dead horses of the Night's Watch arranged in a spiral on the Fist of the First Men. In Season 8, Episode 1, Winterfell, which aired on April 14, 2019, when Tormund and Beric find the young Lord Umber pinned to a wall surrounded by severed limbs arranged in the same spiral pattern. The boy's eyes open. He has been turned into a white. Beric sets him on fire, and the entire spiral ignites, burning against the wall like a terrible, ancient sigil. The showrunners eventually explained the symbol's origins. The spiral was sacred to the children of the forest. It was the pattern of stones they arranged around the weirwood tree when they created the Night King. The White Walkers adopted the symbol as a kind of blasphemy, the way an enemy might take your flag and fly it upside down. They took the symbol of their creators and twisted it into a calling card for death. Every spiral of bodies is the Night King's way of saying, I was made by the children, and I turned their sacred geometry into a monument of slaughter. But the fan theories went further. Some argued that the spiral was connected to the Targaryen sigil, which features 3 dragons arranged in a circular pattern. Others argued that the spiral represented a cyclical view of time, that the White Walkers were leaving messages about the nature of time itself, about the idea that the long night is not a singular event but a recurring one, a wheel that turns and turns and turns. And still others argued that the spiral was a map, that if you overlaid the spiral pattern onto the geography of Westeros, it would point to specific locations, specific weirwood trees, specific nodes in the magical network that connects the children of the forest to the land. None of these theories were confirmed. The show gave you the official answer: blasphemy, desecration, a sacred symbol corrupted, and left the rest to your imagination. But the spirals do something for the story that no explanation can fully capture. They make the White Walkers feel real. They make them feel like beings with culture, with ritual, with a language of symbols that predates human civilization. The spirals tell you that the White Walkers are not mindless. They are not simply killing machines. They are making art. Terrible, horrifying art, made from the bodies of the dead, but art nonetheless. They are communicating, and the fact that no one in the living world can read what they are saying is part of the horror. The message is there, the meaning is there, but the language is dead, or too old, or too alien for any human mind to decipher. Think about what that implies for the history of Westeros. Thousands of years of civilization, of maesters and scholars and keepers of knowledge, and no one has preserved the ability to read the White Walkers' symbols. Whatever the children of the forest knew about the spiral, whatever lore once existed about the meaning of these patterns, has been lost. The living world has forgotten how to read the language of the dead. And the dead keep writing it anyway, in blood and bone and ice, on the walls of caves and the floors of forests, and the battlefields of the living. The spirals are a message in a bottle, thrown across millennia, and no one is left who can open the bottle and read what is inside. That is the kind of mystery that makes theories inevitable. When a story gives you a symbol and refuses to fully decode it, the audience does the decoding themselves. And the decoded versions, the fan theories about what the spirals mean, are often more interesting than any official explanation could be. Because the official explanation closes the door, the theory leaves it open, and an open door is always more compelling than a closed one, because you can imagine what is on the other side. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a question that Arya Stark asks in the series finale that in many ways encapsulates everything that Game of Thrones is about. She asks, What is west of Westeros? It is a simple question. A child's question. The kind of thing a curious person asks when they look at a map and notice that the edge of the map is not the edge of the world. Westeros is a continent. To its east lies Essos, the larger continent where Daenerys spent most of her story. To its south lies Sothorios, a land of jungles and disease that the show never visits. But to its west, there is nothing. The Sunset Sea, an ocean that, as far as anyone in the world of the show knows, goes on forever. Arya's question is the last question the show asks. It is the note it ends on. After everything, after the wars and the prophecies and the theories and the revelations, after the Night King and the Mad Queen and the King in the wheelchair, the show's final statement is not an answer. It is a question. What is west of Westeros? What is beyond the edge of the map? What is out there, past the boundary of everything we know? In the books, there is a historical figure who asked the same question. Alyssa Farman, a Westerosi noblewoman from the time of the Targaryen kings, built a ship and sailed west into the Sunset Sea. She discovered 3 small islands, which she named after the Targaryen conquerors, Aegon, Rhaenys, and Visenya. And then she kept going. She sailed past the islands and into the unknown, and she was never seen alive again. But her ship, the Sun Chaser, was reportedly spotted years later in the port of Ashai, on the far eastern edge of the known world. If the sighting was real, it means Alyssa sailed all the way around the world. It means the Sunset Sea is not infinite. It connects to the Eastern Ocean. The world of Game of Thrones is round, and Alyssa Farman proved it, centuries before any of the events of the show. The theory connected to Arya's ending is less about what she will find, and more about what the question itself means. Arya has spent the entire series defined by a list of names, people she wants to kill. Her story is a story of vengeance, of training to become a weapon, of learning how to wear other people's faces and take other people's lives. And in the finale, she puts the list down. She puts the training down, she puts the vengeance down, and she picks up a question instead. What is west of Westeros? It is the most hopeful moment in the entire finale. Not because the answer matters, but because the question does. Because the question says that there is still something worth looking for, that the world is bigger than the Game of Thrones, that there are discoveries to be made, adventures to be had, places to go that have nothing to do with politics or prophecy or the endless grinding wheel of power. Arya is not sailing west to escape, she is sailing west to explore. She is choosing curiosity over revenge, wonder over warfare, the unknown over the familiar. And the theory argues that this is the real ending of Game of Thrones. Not Bran on the throne, not Jon in the snow, not Sansa crowned queen in the north. Arya on a ship, pointed toward the edge of the world, asking a question that no one can answer. Because Game of Thrones was always, at its deepest level, a story about the tension between the known and the unknown, between the mapped territory and the unmapped, between the stories we tell ourselves about how the world works and the reality that the world is always bigger, always stranger, always more mysterious than any story can contain. The theories are part of that tension. Every theory about Game of Thrones is an attempt to map unmapped territory, to find pattern in chaos, to turn the unknown into the known, and the show's refusal to confirm many of its most compelling theories is not a failure. It is a statement. It is the show saying that some questions are more valuable unanswered, that the mystery is more important than the solution. And in that going, in that willingness to face the unknown without a theory to comfort her, she is doing something that none of the theorists, none of the prophets, none of the seers and oracles and red priestesses of the story ever managed to do. She is letting the story surprise her. She is letting the world be whatever it is, instead of what she expected it to be. There is one more theory that deserves its place in this conversation, and it is one of the strangest, most paranoid, and most deliciously conspiratorial theories the fandom ever produced. The theory that Littlefinger faked his death. Petyr Baelish, Lord Baelish, Littlefinger, the man who climbed from nothing to nearly everything, who started the War of the Five Kings with a lie, who sold Sansa Stark to the Boltons, who murdered Lysa Arryn by pushing her through the moon door, who betrayed everyone who ever trusted him, dies in The Dragon and the Wolf, Season 7, Episode 7, which aired on August 27, 2017. He dies in the Great Hall of Winterfell, on his knees, begging, while Sansa pronounces his sentence and Arya draws a dagger across his throat. It is one of the most satisfying deaths in the series. The manipulator outmanipulated. The spider caught in its own web. The game player who finally lost the game. But some fans refused to accept it. They argued that Littlefinger, the most cunning man in Westeros, could not have been caught so easily. They argued that a man who had spent his entire life anticipating betrayal, who had contingency plans for his contingency plans, who had never been outmaneuvered by anyone, would not have simply walked into a trap in the Great Hall of Winterfell. They argued that the man Arya killed was not Littlefinger at all. It was a faceless man wearing Littlefinger's face. The evidence, such as it is, comes from a brief scene in Season 7, Episode 5, Eastwatch, which aired on August 13, 2017. Arya follows Littlefinger through the corridors of Winterfell, spying on him. She watches him receive a raven scroll and meet with various people, and at one point, she watches him speak with a young woman, a servant, or perhaps something more. The woman whispers to him and hands him something that some viewers interpreted as a coin, like the iron coin of the Faceless Men, the one Jaqen H'ghar gave Arya years ago. Valar Morghulis. All men must die. The theory builds from this detail. It argues that Littlefinger, who comes from a family with Braavosi roots, who would know about the Faceless Men, who would have the resources and the cunning to arrange such a thing, hired a faceless man to take his place. That the person Arya killed in the Great Hall was a decoy, wearing Littlefinger's face, while the real Littlefinger escaped Winterfell and vanished into the world, still scheming, still climbing, still playing the game that he invented. It is an absurd theory. The show gives you no real reason to believe it. Littlefinger dies. He begs, and he bleeds, and he falls, and there is no ambiguity in the staging. The show does not wink at the camera. It does not leave a door open. Littlefinger is dead. And yet the theory persists. It persists because Littlefinger's death, satisfying as it is, feels almost too neat for Game of Thrones. It feels too much like the audience getting what it wants, which is something Game of Thrones almost never gives you without a hidden cost. The show trained you, over 7 seasons, to expect betrayal, to expect the unexpected, to expect that the obvious reading is the wrong reading. And Littlefinger's death is the most obvious reading possible. The bad guy gets caught, the bad guy gets punished, the Stark sisters triumph, the audience cheers. It is exactly the kind of clean, satisfying resolution that Game of Thrones spent its entire run subverting. So when fans looked at Littlefinger's death and said, "This is too easy," they were not being irrational. They were applying the logic the show taught them. They were doing exactly what the show trained them to do. Question the obvious. Look for the hidden truth. Assume that nothing is what it appears to be. The fact that, in this case, the obvious answer was the correct one does not invalidate the instinct. It just means that the show, in its final seasons, became a different kind of show than the one the audience had learned to read. That shift, from a show that rewarded paranoid attention to detail, to a show that delivered more conventional narrative satisfactions, is one of the unspoken tensions at the heart of the Game of Thrones experience. The early seasons taught you to read like a theorist. The late seasons asked you to read like a casual viewer. And the disconnect between those two modes of reading is the reason so many of the show's final developments, from Littlefinger's death to Cersei's end to the Night King's defeat, felt wrong to the people who had spent years looking for deeper meanings. The deeper meanings were not there anymore. The show was telling you what it meant, on the surface, without subtext, without hidden layers, and the audience that had been trained to dig kept digging and finding nothing. That is not a failure of the audience, and it is not necessarily a failure of the show. It is the inevitable friction that occurs when a story changes its relationship with its own viewers. Game of Thrones began as a story that respected the theorist's mind, that rewarded close reading, that hid its best ideas beneath layers of misdirection. And it ended as a story that valued spectacle over subtlety, momentum over nuance, resolution over mystery. The theories are, in a sense, the artifact of that transition. They are the fossils of the show's earlier self, preserved in amber, still glittering, still fascinating, even after the world that created them has moved on. That is the final lesson of the theories. Not that they were right or wrong, not that the show fulfilled them or failed them, but that the act of theorizing, the act of looking at a story and asking what if, is an act of love. And the act of setting the theories down, of accepting that the story went where it went and meant what it meant, is an act of grace. Both are necessary, both are valuable, and both are part of what it means to care about a story enough to spend years inside it, building houses of speculation and interpretation and hope, and then watching as the wind blows some of them down and leaves others standing. We have come a long way. We have traced the theories of Game of Thrones from the most famous to the most obscure, from the confirmed to the denied to the beautifully unresolved. We have talked about prophecy and time and blood and fire and ice and the human heart in conflict with itself. And it is time, now, to bring it all together, to ask the question that sits beneath all the other questions. What do the theories mean? Not individually, collectively. What does it mean that millions of people spent years building elaborate intellectual constructions around a television show, and that those constructions, in many cases, were more interesting, more coherent, and more emotionally satisfying than the show's actual conclusions? Here is what the theories tell you about Game of Thrones. They tell you that the show created a world so rich, so detailed, so full of hidden connections and buried implications, that it could sustain an almost infinite number of interpretations. The theories are not parasites on the story. They are part of the story. They are the story's offspring, the children it did not know it had, born from the union of George R.R. Martin's imagination and the collective intelligence of millions of readers and viewers. R+L J tells you that the show was built on secrets, that the surface story, the one about bastards and battles and noble houses, was always covering a deeper story about identity and truth and the lies we tell to protect the people we love. The Azor Ahai prophecy tells you that the show was suspicious of heroes, that it believed in the human tendency to look for saviors and the human disappointment when the savior turns out to be a person, flawed and uncertain, rather than a myth. The Mad Queen theory tells you that the show understood something about power that most stories do not, that the line between hero and villain is not a wall, it is a gradient. It is a slow fade from one to the other, and you do not notice the change until it is too late. The Bran time travel theory tells you that the show was interested in the nature of time itself, in the question of whether the past is finished or still being written, in the possibility that the stories we tell about history are not just descriptions of what happened, but forces that shape what will happen. The Grand Northern Conspiracy tells you that the show believed in loyalty, that it believed loyalty could survive anything, even betrayal, even murder, even the apparent destruction of everything worth being loyal to. And the theory of Lightbringer tells you that the show believed in sacrifice, real sacrifice, not the kind where you give up something you can afford to lose, the kind where you give up the thing you cannot live without, and then you live without it, and the living is the cost. These theories, taken together, form a picture of Game of Thrones that is richer and more complex than any single viewing of the show can provide. They are the accumulated wisdom of a community of viewers who refused to be passive consumers of a story, who insisted on engaging with it, arguing about it, tearing it apart, and putting it back together in new configurations. The theories are the proof that Game of Thrones was not just a show. It was a conversation, a decade-long conversation between a story and its audience, conducted in the language of prophecy and analysis and obsessive attention to detail. And now the show is over. The theories are settled or unsettled. The books remain unfinished. The conversation has quieted but never stopped. Because that is the thing about theories. They do not need the show to survive. They live on in the space between what the story told you and what it meant, in the gap between the text and the interpretation, in the silence after the last episode fades to black, where you sit in the dark and think, but what if? What if Jon had drawn Lightbringer from the fire? What if Bran was the Night King all along? What if the North remembered sooner? What if Daenerys had turned back when the bells rang? What if? What if? What if? The theories are the what-ifs, and the what-ifs are where the story lives forever. There is a passage in A Game of Thrones, the first novel, where Tyrion Lannister says something that could serve as the epigraph for this entire video. A mind needs books as a sword needs a whetstone, if it is to keep its edge. The theories are the whetstone, the show is the sword, and the sharpening, the back and forth between what the story shows you and what the audience discovers within it, is the thing that gives both their edge. Think about the scale of it. Think about how many people, across how many years, across how many countries and languages and time zones, sat down and thought about this story. Not just watched it, thought about it, argued about it, built theories about it, wrote thousands of words about a fictional world's fictional prophecies, debating the finer points of Valyrian grammar, the bloodline succession of a dynasty that does not exist, the symbology of a religion practiced by no one, The theories are the monument that the audience built for this story, a monument not of stone or steel, but of thought, of collective attention, of the simple, stubborn human refusal to take a story at face value when you suspect it has more to give. And what did Game of Thrones give? It gave us R+L = J, and the understanding that the most honorable man in the story was also the biggest liar. It gave us Azor Ahai, and the understanding that prophecy is a promise the universe makes to itself and may or may not keep. It gave us the Mad Queen, and the understanding that the line between justice and cruelty is drawn not in the actions themselves, but in the heart of the person performing them. It gave us Hodor, and the understanding that time is not a river but a loop, and we are all caught in it, repeating the words we do not understand until the moment they were always meant to apply. It gave us the Night King, and the understanding that the greatest enemy is not a person or an army, but the idea of annihilation itself, the void that waits at the end of all stories. It gave us the Valonqar, and the understanding that love and destruction are not opposites but partners, and that the hand that holds you can also be the hand that kills you. It gave us Lightbringer, and the understanding that saving the world always costs more than the world will ever repay. These are not small things. These are the kinds of ideas that great literature wrestles with, and Game of Thrones wrestled with them in front of the largest audience any television show had ever assembled. It did not always wrestle gracefully. It stumbled in the later rounds. It left some fights unfinished. But it stepped into the ring. It swung. And the theories, the beautiful, obsessive, sometimes wrong, sometimes right, always passionate theories, are the proof that the audience swung back. The candles are low, the hour is late, the fire is dying, and the wolves are howling somewhere beyond the wall, and the stars are cold and distant and uncaring. But the stories remain, the theories remain. The long night is dark and full of terrors, but it is also full of questions, and the questions are what keep us awake, keep us talking, keep us coming back to this world that George R.R. Martin built, and David Benioff and D.B. Weiss brought to the screen. A world where nothing is simple, where the hero is also the villain, where the prophecy is also the lie, where the theory is also the truth, and where the truth, whatever it is always more complicated, more beautiful, and more heartbreaking than you expected. Game of Thrones premiered on April 17, 2011. It ended on May 19, 2019. 8 seasons, 73 episodes, millions of viewers, billions of words written in analysis and theory and argument and love. And when it was over, when the screen went dark for the last time, the theories did not stop. They could not stop. Because the theories are not about answering questions, they are about the pleasure of asking them. They are about the human need to look at a story and see more than what is on the surface, to dig deeper, to find the pattern, to hear the prophecy and wonder, not whether it is true, but what it would mean if it were. That is what Game of Thrones gave us. Not just a story, a mirror that showed us what we look like when we care about something deeply enough to spend years trying to understand it. And what we look like is this. We look like theorists. We look like detectives. We look like readers and watchers and listeners who refuse to accept the easy answer, who always push for the deeper truth, who know that the best stories are the ones that leave room for you to find something the storyteller did not intend, something that exists in the space between their imagination and yours, something that belongs to both of you, and to neither of you, and to everyone who has ever sat in the dark and wondered what happens next. The long night is over, but the theories go on, and as long as they go on, the story is not finished. It will never be finished. Because the best theories are not answers. They are invitations. Invitations to look again, to see more clearly, to notice what you missed the first time, and the second time, and the 100th time. And that is the real magic of Game of Thrones. Not the dragons, not the White Walkers, not the Iron Throne. The magic is the looking. The magic is the seeing. The magic is the moment when you pause the episode, lean forward, and say, "Wait, did you see that? Did you catch that? Do you know what that means?" Because in the end, Game of Thrones is not a story about who wins the throne. It is a story about attention, about what you choose to look at, and how looking carefully changes what you see. The casual viewer watches the Red Wedding and sees a shocking death. The theorist watches the Red Wedding and sees the culmination of a betrayal that was seeded 3 seasons earlier, in the words of Walder Frey, in the body language of Roose Bolton, in the decision Robb made when he married for love instead of duty. The casual viewer watches Bran become king and feels confused. The theorist watches Bran become king and sees the fulfillment of a pattern that began when a boy climbed a tower and was pushed from a window, beginning a journey that would carry him beyond the boundary of human consciousness itself. The theories do not make the show better, they make the show bigger. They expand it beyond the boundaries of the screen, beyond the 60 minutes of each episode, beyond the 8 seasons and the 73 episodes and the final credits. They turn the show into a living thing, a conversation that continues long after the last scene fades, a puzzle that is never quite solved because the pleasure is not in the solution but in the solving. And that, perhaps, is the most important theory of all, the meta-theory, the theory about theories. The idea that the best stories are not the ones that answer every question, but the ones that generate questions so beautiful, so compelling, so impossible to fully resolve, that the audience carries them forward forever, turning them over and over in their minds like stones polished smooth by the ocean, each turn revealing a new facet, each facet catching a different light. Game of Thrones generated those questions. The theories preserved them, and here, in the quiet hours, in the space between sleep and waking, they endure, they shimmer, they wait for you to pick them up and turn them over one more time. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.